I'd like to call this meeting to order, and as usual, we'll begin with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Ward, would you call the roll, please? Pardon.
City Council President Suzanne Stone.
Here.
Councilperson Joseph Day.
Here.
Councilperson Marion Blatman.
Here.
Councilperson Andrew Zell.
Here.
Councilperson Brian Madden.
Here.
Also present, Mayor Valerie Leary, City Administrator Nina Santillo, Chief of Police Richard McCabe, City Planner Chris Rogers, and City Solicitor Michael Hoffman.
Thank you. We'll begin with a review of the minutes of the January 14th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll just abstain. I wasn't
Oh,
here.
right, very good. All right, thank you. Okay, tonight we have reports from two of our committees or commissions, beginning with the Flood Resiliency Committee, and I'll introduce Alice Reel, who's the chair of that committee, to present their report.
Good evening. Thanks for, is this on? No. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, thanks for giving me an opportunity to tell you about the state of our committee. A year ago, approximately from today, we were still awaiting a funding for a project that we had gotten approved for, the Wetlands Preservation Project for the Natural Resources Conservation Service of the Department of Agriculture, which would have been our godsend. It would have paid for every, for handling virtually every flooding problem we have. Unfortunately, the funding, we waited and we waited and we waited, and it didn't materialize, so we finally went to the conservationist, a person who was new. The previous conservationist apparently had been more positive about our project, but the new conservationist was not encouraging. And we found out also that our project would be behind national projects like taking care of Asheville after the flooding. So it didn't seem like we really were gonna, there was a good possibility that we would have that project. Now, originally we had been the Sea Level Rise Task Force, and we switched over to the Flood Resiliency Committee, a standing committee, but we were only going to be meeting quarterly because we really were just acting as a liaison with the NRCS, that's the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So we realized we'd have to look for funding elsewhere. So first of all, we switched our meetings to monthly again. And we went out and looked for more funding. And one of the organizations we approached was the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They have a Philadelphia office. And we contacted them, and we had an initial phone call, or Zoom meeting, I suppose, with some of the people there. And they were very encouraging about the possibility of being able to address some of our concerns. And we got together a meeting of the people from the Corps, and also, by the way, Ms. Tentillo put this together very well. People from DelDOT, DENREC, our state representatives, and Senator Poore, and also Kevin Donnelly from the Conservation District, and the people from the Corps. So they came to Newcastle on February 6th, and we discussed our problems, our city engineer, made a presentation to them. And then they were taken on a little tour of some problem areas. And I'll tell you what the problem areas we outlined were the coast, obviously, with the Strand specifically, flooding on Route 9, both at the Three Countries Pizza and at the Army Dike down below, going south from here, and also some flooding in Buttonwood. And we had originally said that we would, because it was so hard to get funding for a larger project, we would be looking at a smaller project like the flooding in the roadways. And when we spoke to the Army Corps of Engineers, they said it would be actually easier for them to do a project for the coastal flooding because it's obvious what the reason for the flooding is. Whereas there would have to be some initial investigation of the other flooding on the roadways and in Buttonwood. So, but they also encouraged us to request help for the whole situation. And interestingly, they don't have a form that you fill out, you know, this is what we want. You just say, here's our problem, what can you do for us? So Ms. Tantillo is putting that together for us, and they urged us to do it as quickly as we could because they wanted to get started on something. They were very encouraging. Anyway, so that was a very successful meeting that we had. We also, soon after that, we spoke to, trying to remember now where I went there. We went to, we had a meeting with, what did we do next?
We met with GAP and we met with Danielle Swallow
Yeah.
The Sea Grant.
from the city.
Right, oh yeah, so we were talking to Sea Grant and the Rascal. Danielle Swallow is our sort of liaison there. She's very familiar with our situation. She was part of the presentation we made in May of 23, I guess it was, telling citizens how they can protect themselves against flooding. And you know, she's really very knowledgeable, and as I said, knows our situation. So we had hoped that we could be part of something called the Coastal Resiliency Design Studio, which is a group of people from the University of Delaware. They're students, but they're architecture students, they're landscape architecture students, they're engineers, and they all get together and they look at a problem for a community, and then they devise plans. They don't have the money for it, but they have something that you can then take to someone. And this is what we're really hoping for, some kind of shovel-ready project that we can bring somewhere, and we can say, here's what we need, you know, what can you do about it? So we're also talking to FEMA, well, not talking, well, DEMA, the state organization, Antonina and I were part of a seminar for that, where they help you put together an application for funding for various projects. And so, you know, there's a March 18th deadline for that. We were hoping for sort of like a planning, funding for planning, so that we can then have a shovel-ready project that we can bring. And there is a little bit of a concern because, not just a little bit, I suppose, but because the current administration has cut off a lot of the funding, and originally they thought that the funding for this would be cut off. They don't know if it will, but they're still asking us to submit the application. And as a matter of fact, that problem with the freezing of funding hangs over our head for all of us, all these projects, including, I would think, the U.S. Corps of Engineers. Anyway, so that's where we are. We're looking at various opportunities to get some funding for projects, because we know we want to do something, you know, we want to show something for all of our efforts. And we were very excited about the previous project, and we're still encouraged by the person, our liaison there, is still encouraging us to not lose hope, but we kind of have in that project. So that's where we are. For the questions that were asked, the one thing that I think I want to mention is that all of us on the committee, and we're going to have a new member, Melissa Pavone, who's Jonathan Justice's wife, I don't know if you all know her, she has a really extensive educational, experiential background in city planning, which is gonna be very helpful to us. But the one thing that we would really like is if we could have the services of the city engineer in all of our meetings. Because none of us are engineers, none of us have a floodplain management experience or anything like that. We do what we can and, we follow the trail for funding, but we often have questions that can't be answered by anybody sitting in front of us. So we have to wait for the next meeting to do that, and can be frustrating. So anyway, that's the only thing I would ask. Okay, thanks. Does anybody have any questions? Okay,
I don't
great.
have a question, but I just want to say thank you to you and the entire workforce for such a dedicated work. You guys are back and forth a lot of places, and Councilperson Sauter has been briefing us every meeting on the progress and, back and forth between the state and, the grant, but it's great to hear all the stuff in the background. But,
Thank you. Thank you, and, the committee would like to thank Suzanne and also Antonina, who has been incredibly supportive for the committee since she's been here, so I appreciate that. Thank you. I'll pass that along. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just add that it's hard when there's nothing concrete, but that doesn't mean you're not working.
It takes a long time to get to this point where you actually get the grant.
Right, yeah, if we don't start now, we're not in line,
Right.
and it takes several years once you get in line, so.
Yeah.
All right, and the next report is from our Historic Area Commission, Tara Hayward Olivas.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. Can everyone hear me? You can move it to wherever you.
Yeah,
Is
or
this-
hold it, it comes out of the stand if you prefer.
I think I'll keep it
Okay.
there. I'll lean down a little bit. Thank you for the opportunity to update you as to what we've been up to in 2024. It was a busy year. We had a total of 166 Tier 1 reviews, so those are staff reviews that are conducted either by Layla Hamroon, our preservation architect, or Jeff Bergstrom, our building official. We had 33 Tier 2 reviews, so those are applications that come before the commission. That includes 3 special meetings that we held, so the applications that we reviewed at those, and 7 consultations. We worked with our new city administrator and office staff to implement a better process so that we have only Tier 2 applications on the agenda. Before, we had both Tier 1 and Tier 2 applications on the agenda, and it was creating a lot of confusion. We would have Tier 1 applicants show up to the meeting. They really didn't need to be there, they weren't required to be there, and so we wanted to make sure that this was not only addressed because it's more efficient for us as a commission, but also to be respectful of applicants' time. Office staff, Ms. Tantillo, Layla Hamroon, we worked together to create a more efficient process for reporting our Tier 1 and Tier 2 summaries, so this makes it a lot easier for Marika Levine, who is Jeff Bergstrom's secretary, to report to applicants and contractors when they call. Just another way we're trying to make the process more efficient. We also found that a lot of the applicants who come to us they're not aware of resources and incentives that are available to them in terms of grants or tax credits. Most people are familiar here with the Downtown Development District program, but what they're not familiar with is the state's preservation tax credit program, which is available to anyone who has lives in a contributing building or property within the historic district, and that can actually be combined with the DDD program. So there's a lot that's available that people didn't know about or weren't taking advantage of. So we wanted to make sure that more people are aware of that. It's also available to nonprofits, businesses, private individuals, so it's a really great program. We held a work session in June to review the existing half page on the city website. We discussed some changes to improve user experience, how we could make the information a little bit more easy to digest, easier to search for what applicants might be looking for. We discussed adding something like a frequently asked questions page, and maybe making it a little bit clearer on how applicants can identify whether or not their property is listed in the historic district. For our goals and plans for 2025, we'll continue to work with the city administrator to make sure that we're working efficiently. We plan on creating educational materials that are focused on the role of the Historic Area Commission and on the process of applying for a historic review certificate. We've noticed that a lot of times when there is a holdup or if an application is delayed, it's because the application for the project is delayed, I should say. The application wasn't complete, there's information missing, so we want to make sure that whether the applicant is the building owner, the homeowner, if it's a contractor, that they understand the process completely, so they're not held up by having to resubmit or to backtrack or even have to redo or remove work that was done without approval. We've also discussed training workshops for commissioners and city officials, climate adaptation workshops focused on small historic districts, and we think this is something that could be worked on maybe in tandem with what some of the other commissions and committees are doing. We're currently working on a document that provides detailed specifics on aspects of compliance in areas such as signage for the historic commercial area, and we hope that this will make it a little bit easier for business owners and residents to identify the application process and how to get things approved, how to come before the commission. As far as budget needs, as a certified local government, we qualify for CLG grants every year. These can be used to pursue historic preservation related projects and programs. They're awarded on a 60-40 matching basis, so they give us 60%, and we provide the remaining 40% through cash and or donated services or materials. We think that $6,000 would be a good average, which would help us with projects up to about $15,000. And in addition, the commission has identified a few areas where we feel more support would be needed. One of those would be more uniform enforcement of the Historic Area Commission regulations. We realize that we're without a code enforcer right now, and that we have been for a year but there is a problem that when long-time violations persist, it can just create a lot of confusion and make it more difficult in the long run to enforce the HAC guidelines and standards. We've also identified a need for more support from city employees and elected officials. Specifically, there have been instances where decisions have been made that affect areas that are under the purview of the Historic Area Commission, where the commission was not consulted or they didn't issue an approval. And ultimately this undermines the role of the commission. And so we just respectfully request that the city and elected officials defer to the Historic Area Commission before taking any action that impacts the historic area. And lastly, this is something that we've been working on and continue to work on, but just improved communication between city applicants and contractors. And that is all that I have. Are there any questions for me?
Two.
Yes.
Thank you, first of all, for presenting. This is great. Thank you, Councilperson Adler, for introducing this format. This is, I know it's an additional thing to do already donating your time to the city, but it helps understand all the work that you guys do, and especially in the end now, kind of like the needs and, you know, the requests. That's very helpful. The CLG grant, are we utilizing it right now? Sorry that I don't know that, or is that something you were thinking we could apply for?
Yes, so, I think the application should open soon. That's something that I think we need to discuss with
Yeah, Layla
Ms.
and I
Cameron.
started talking about it, Layla, our historic architect, and I started talking about it last week. And we're going to return to the conversation once we, find out the date that it will.
Okay. That leads to my next question, which is, when you mentioned $6,000, was that the matching part that you were, asking the city council? Or is that out of the 7,000 we already put for the hack preservation?
So this would just be, this is just an approximate, or an average, like every year. If you were to put a line item in the budget, this is typically what we would need.
Okay, so we have probably about that already. I'm reading, I just want to know if we can add the existing lines or not, but that's great to hear. That it's kind of, okay.
Yeah, that's fun this year, yeah. So, continue.
Perfect. And then, always great to see grants that can help, you know,
Absolutely.
alleviate some of that and move it around. So, yeah. I'll reach out personally with an email to see instances where we may have made a decision in tax act, because I'm curious. I love the communication suggestion you had, so I'd like to know kind of.
Fantastic.
I always ask engineers, you know, like, has this been in planning, has this been in CAD, because, you know, when it
There's a
comes
lot
here,
of-
I'm assuming everybody has seen it before us. And
There's a
we're just
lot of
kind
moving
you know,
parts, yeah, there's a lot of,
yeah, that's
Yeah.
just what I mentioned, that, you know, we try to ask and, you know, so we can just nod, because typically, if it's been with hack and planning, there's not much really, you know, discussion we should have at that point, but, you know, anyways, just curious, so I'll reach out with email for some reason.
thank you.
So, thank you for this. Question on, new homeowners. How are they notified? I know, other houses that I bought, I was part of a homeowner association, and I had to sign paperwork. So is there some scenario that we can make sure the new homeowners that are actually in the historic district are aware?
That's a really good question, and I think that's something that we could discuss. I've done a comparison study. A lot of different areas do it different ways. One thing that I saw recently that the city of Alexandria, Virginia does is they send out an annual letter to everyone. I think they have a couple different historic districts, but they basically just let the person know, or whoever is living at the property know that they're in the boundaries of a historic district, or that they're contributing property, what they need to do. As far as for new homeowners, I can only speak from my own experience when we purchased our house here, which was that our realtor was very communicative, letting us know that it was a historic district and that there were rules that we would need to follow. But as far as I'm aware right now, there's nothing in place where anybody has to sign anything, or there's any disclosure that's given up front. I hope that answers your question.
The only thing I'll throw in is, one of the questions on the state of Delaware seller disclosure form is this property subject to any regulation? And it gives examples such as the homeowners association, but it also includes the historic area. So that should be on the seller's disclosure form, which the buyer then signs. So, and I realize there's a lot going on when you go to settlement, so this may kind of slip under the radar. And it depends, as you noted, on the realtor, and some realtors are better at explaining that than others, but it's not totally omitted.
It's not. I was trying to be a little nice. Like, I don't know if some of it's just people don't know, or willful ignorance, but, you know, I think we could do something just to remind people, so,
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that I really like that, that conversation that just happened, because I think we could probably incorporate it, with some stuff that's already going out to residents, and perhaps start talking with new residents. My question for you, Antonina, was, whether we are already are we talking about all the incentives that you mentioned earlier, not just through hack, but other incentives and tax breaks for residents? Are we sending that in mail to folks throughout the year?
Not mail that I'm aware of, certainly on our website. I did mention, the last meeting when Mr. Farrell came, and we talked about the DDA, so we're trying to plan for like a multifaceted, meeting to talk about things like this, incentives and the DDD and other things, so we'll certainly include that information.
Okay, I wonder if we can, outline the deadlines for different programs that are available on the website, and kind of time it in courier, like as we send things out as a reminder, you're eligible for X, Y, or Z programs, that people can maybe look into it.
And when people apply, we do let them know if they are eligible for DDD, or things like that. Oh, I'm sorry. We do let them know once they apply, that they are eligible for certain things and encourage them to apply, so.
All right, perfect.
Certainly on our radar.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is a presentation from our auditors, Mr. Frank Throda and Evan Petrin of Wissman, Giordano and Associates. And while they're moving to the podium, I'll just remind people of what I've said in the past, that even though our treasurer, Jim Wissman, is the founder of this firm, he has had no association with it for over 20 years. When he sold it, he just sold the rights to continue to use the name. So in case anybody had any questions about that. Thank you, Mr. Throda.
Thank you for your time. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of walk through, give you a little overview of what took place. So the way the financial statements are presented, the first section is the independent auditor's report, and that's where our opinion will be. Followed by the basic financial statements. So the basic financial statements consist of the entity-wide financial statements, which are on the accrual basis of accounting. It includes all your assets, your liabilities, your pensions, your fixed assets, your debt, a complete picture of where the city stands. It's the same that a normal business would be on the full accrual basis of accounting. Following the entity-wide financial statements are the fund level financial statements, and that's how the government basically operates on a fund level. There's different funds. There's your general fund, which you have an annual budget each year, and there are a lot of special revenue funds that are accounted for, various grants that are received, that we set up a separate fund so that they can control the expenditures separately and improve on the internal controls. Following the fund level statements are the notes to the financial statements. That just gives the reader a better understanding of what the city's policies are, some of the procedures as it relates to generally accepted accounting principles. And excuse me, then there's a bunch of supplemental information which basically has to do with the pension plans. And this information is all taken from another audit report that is performed for the state of Delaware for the pensions. And we basically lift the information from their report and incorporate the appropriate sections that relate to your government. And then in the back, there is some supplemental information that has a breakdown of your balance sheet and your statement of revenues. And then the last thing is the internal control and recommendation report. So I'm just gonna review the independent auditor's report, which is on page 1. The independent auditor's report starts out with the opinion, because that's the most important part of the report. This way it gives the reader a better understanding of what took place. So it basically states, we've audited the financial statements of the government activities of the city of Newcastle as of and for the years ended June 30, 2024 and 2023, along with the related notes to the financial statements. Second paragraph states, in our opinion, the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So what we have here is an unmodified report or clean report, and this is the type of report you'd like to get as part of the audit. Okay, so there's no material departures from generally accepted accounting principles. It's a clean opinion. The next paragraph talks about the basis for our opinion. We're required to conduct the audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards in the United States of America. As part of that, we're required to be independent of the city, and we're supposed to have meet our ethical and professional standards, which our audit team has met. The next area talks about the responsibility of management for the financial statements. It's management's responsibility to prepare the financial statements and assist in that process, as well as to maintain a design and implement proper internal controls within the city. Our audit objectives basically say our objectives are to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are fairly stated. So what we do is we do various sampling techniques. We look at cash receipts, we make a selection of cash receipts, cash disbursements, look at your payroll procedures, look at your purchasing, and we do sampling techniques, because we can't possibly test 100% of your transactions. If we did, it would be very expensive, fee. So we do sampling, and based on that, if there's no exceptions, we're able to rely on those internal controls that are in place. And then finally, it talks about supplemental information that's in here, and as part of the audit procedures, we review them, making sure that those numbers are in relationship to the financial statements are fairly presented. So again, this is a clean opinion. If you continue now to the basic financial statements section, I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. On page 4, this is the entity-wide financial statement. And if you look at your numbers from year to year, there hasn't been really much of a change. So your current assets are 11.4 million compared to 11.1 in the prior year. When you look at your current assets of 11.4 million compared to your current liabilities of 2.3, you're at a ratio of 4.9% compared to 5.4 in the prior year. So it shows that your balance sheet is strong at the end of June 30, 2024 and 2023. If you look at your net position, you'll see that you have unrestricted reserves of about $9 million. Okay, so again, shows that the balance sheet is very strong at the end of the year. When you go to page 5, here we have the income statement. Again, this is on the entity-wide level. So it shows that you have $7.2 million in revenue compared to 6.3 in expenses. So for the year, you had a positive $937,000. So again, shows you had a good fiscal year. In the prior year, your increase was 1.2. So it's down about 300,000, but again, you still had a positive year. When you look at page 7, your fund level statements, again, not many significant changes from the year. Your assets went up about 300,000. Your liabilities went up about 220, but your fund balance, your increased revenue over expenses increased by $111,000. So again, from the fund level standpoint, a positive year, okay? Then if you continue, if you look at the income statement, this year we had $7.3 million in revenue compared to about $6.5 million in the prior year, so increase in revenue. We also had an increase in expenses. Expenses were $7.2 million this year compared to $6.4. And again, your revenue over expenses were $110,000, so a good year. As far as the notes to the financial statements, there have been no changes to the notes. Okay, they're basic, they're in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So nothing really to kind of highlight since everything's pretty much consistent. The one page I'd like to just kind of walk through in a little more detail is on page 34. This is the general fund budget that the board council approves each year. And for the year, council had a budget of $4.1 million in revenue. They had a budget of $5.5 million in expenses. Okay, then they had additional financing sources coming in of $672,000. So for the year, we actually budgeted a loss of $663,000, and we were going to use some of the reserves to kind of balance the budget. But based on the results of this year, we didn't have to use a lot of our reserves. So what ended up happening was for the year, we had $5.3 million in revenues. So that exceeded the budget by $1.2 million, so that was good. We had, as a result of that, we also had an increase of expenses, so we budgeted 5.5, came in at 6.1, okay? But for the year, we only had a loss of $6,000 compared to we were budgeting $663,000. So we had a significant swing during the year. What caused that favorable result was, if you look at the budget, the property transfer tax, we budgeted $250,000, and we actually brought in $760,000. So that was a positive $500,000. Also, in licenses and permits, we budgeted $317,000, and that came in at $535,000. So that was an increase of $200,000. Okay. So from a revenue standpoint, that accounted for majority of the increases. As far as the expenses, the government fund, we budgeted 1.2, it came in at about 1.3. That was just due to some, unusual department expenses that came up during the year. Public safety, we budgeted 2.5, that came in at, we budgeted 2.2, that came in at 2.5. So there was overspent the budget by $330,000 there, okay? And then capital outlays, which a lot more projects got completed this year, so the capital outlays were greater than the original budget again. But again, a positive year. Then after that, we just have some supplemental information, which again ties to the front of the statements. And then we have a lot of pension disclosures, which basically we take from another audit report. And then we have the recommendations in the back. And last year we had 4 recommendations, and management is working towards eliminating those recommendations. One of them has actually been implemented. The other 3, we're in the process of assisting them. And we're hoping by the end of this fiscal year, those recommendations will be addressed, so that next year when we come back, we can report a clean bill of health. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Any questions from council? All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you for your time, appreciate it. Have a good evening.
The next item is the treasurer's report. Mr. Wisman is unexpectedly unable to be with us. His wife has been visiting her son, and her flight, which was supposed to have come in yesterday, got delayed, and it's not coming in until tonight, so he had to pick her up at the airport. But I have the report, and I will review the numbers for you. Our total unrestricted funds as of January 31st were $9,599,755.44. Our total restricted funds were $3,284,058.61, for total cash in accounts of $12,883,814.05. I spoke to Mr. Wisman about this when he told me he wouldn't be able to be here. He said everything's proceeding pretty normally through the year. I went through the report and I see that we have received so far 67% of our projected income, including I think now 100% of our property taxes, and we have spent 54% of projected expenses. So we're in good shape. I mean, obviously, street work and so forth doesn't get done in the winter time, so that probably is why the expenditures are a little lagging behind. But they'll catch up when the weather's suitable for doing that sort of work. So is there a motion to approve the treasurer's report subject to audit?
So moved.
All in favor, a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The report is approved. And now we have a report from our city administrator.
Thank you. So we are working through hiring for a new code enforcement officer. Hopefully I'll be in touch at the next meeting with someone who started. Last month, we advised that we are awaiting an update from the railroad regarding the clean out of the ditch behind the shopping center. Mr. Hermes, the engineer on the Delaware Street Railroad crossing improvements, notified me that Norfolk Southern is continuing to coordinate the clean out and they're committed to completing the work. They're just having some delays due to some staffing shortages that they're facing. So as soon as I receive another update, I received that update today. As soon as I get another one, I will let you know. Also last month, we advised that the addition of the rear of Mount Salem would be removed due
due to the weather. Unfortunately, there were some delays with that work, but they have been working on the project and are continuing to bring the building into compliance. So as the weather continues to warm up over the next couple of weeks, they will be completing that work. The floating pier, the contractor has advised that the floating dock has been fabricated and the gangway fabrication is finishing up. The fabricator is located in Canada and is working through finalizing the delivery. There were some issues with the tariffs, so they are finalizing that delivery. Hopefully, they will get that here by the end of next week. They've not notified us that they will not meet the deadline before the moratorium to draft piles go into place. But, you know, we are approaching that deadline. So while they've assured us that they will meet the deadline, we just want to be cautious that there may be some delays. The work for the citywide paving contract has begun. We met with the awarded contractor, Superlo, to go over the work. So if you see some markings on your streets or your sidewalks, just give us a call if you have any questions, but it's likely that. Construction notices will go out to the property owners surrounding the area where they're doing the work, and we'll also share that on our website and our Facebook. The ADA sidewalk project was awarded to Advanced Paving Services at the last meeting, so we're finalizing their contract and we'll meet with them soon to begin that project. I have some very exciting news. We're working with 3 groups of UD students to aid the city in different research and work projects. The first group is a group of UD Guidance School Public Policy undergraduate students who are working on evaluating revenue streams in the city and exploration of how to increase revenues for the city. The next is a UD Biden School MPA student who's working on an HR project with me to evaluate current job descriptions and the employee handbook and recommend any updates or changes to that. And the last is a UD Communications undergraduate group of students who are working to revamp the city website and provide updates to that. If you remember last year at this time, we began the other project with the zoning and building projects, but this will encompass the whole website. So we're really excited to have all these projects and the help of these students. The other project with UD that I announced at the last meeting with the PhD student that was actually awarded. So that project will begin in the late summer. So I'll have more updates as we approach that season. The dog park, the survey for the survey and the wetlands evaluation has taken place over the last couple of weeks. So they're finalizing the report, collecting the final data that they need, and we should be receiving that report soon. Once we receive that, we can proceed with putting together the specs of the property for fencing and other requirements. Proceed with that project. Just want to remind everyone again about our Code Red system. We've gotten a lot of registration for that, and I really appreciate everyone signing up. We encourage you to enroll if you have not, and if you need any assistance, just contact my office and we'll gladly help you with that. I'm not going to go too in depth regarding flood resiliency since Alice gave a wonderful report, but we did have a really helpful, productive meeting with a lot of our state agencies, state representatives, Senator Coon's office, and the Army Corps to talk about different projects and priorities. So we're really encouraged by their attendance and their talking through all of the concerns that we have. A reminder that the city election will take place on Saturday, April 12th. The notice of solicitation of candidates was posted last month, and the filing period opened on Monday, February 3rd, and will close on Friday, February 28th at 5 p.m. Requests for filing forms are available at the city administration office or via email. 3 seats are up for election: Council President Souter, Councilperson Day, and Councilperson Zell. Those interested in running for any of the open seats on council must comply with state and city code requirements, including being a citizen of the state of Delaware, must be a resident of the city of Newcastle, and have resided in the city for 2 years before the election. At the time of the election, must be a qualified voter of the city, must be at least 21 years of age as of the date of the election, and must have never been convicted of a felony. Residents are reminded to register to vote with the state by April 7th. You can go to ivote.delaware.gov to register. And absentee voting applications will be available on March 3rd, and the first day to file them will be March 10th. Since the last council meeting, we have applied for additional grants. The first one is the Delaware Preservation Fund for development of a capital improvement plan to improve the city administration building. The second is a Keep Delaware Beautiful America 250 grant, which we'll talk about later in the meeting. But this is for beautification of the smaller city parks for cleanup and landscaping. And last is a TAP, Transportation Alternatives Project grant to continue the work towards a vibrant shared use path, which is currently being evaluated by the Delaware Bike Grant Fund for a feasibility study. Additional grants will be applied for this month to include additional park grants, homeland and cybersecurity grants, and additional transportation grants, as well as grants for flooding and hazard mitigation, as Ms. Real alluded to earlier. And that is my report.
Okay, any questions from members of council?
I wanted to thank you for, I hear grants a lot, I'm sure you guys heard a lot of grants in the report, so I want to thank you for pursuing not just yourself, but with other members of commissions, grants and residents to further the reach of our city. So I can't thank you enough for pursuing all these grants. It's great to hear different levels that we're trying to get, and same thing with UD students to kind of explore different things. So thank you for that. For the 80th sidewalk, I'm thrilled that this is happening, but I just wonder if we should have a conversation, a broader conversation out here of, I was shocked when I was in the last meeting, so I was shocked by the bidding differences. And I know it was addressed during the meeting, so I'm sorry about that, but I wonder if we wanna discuss about minimum 3 bids before we bring it up for a decision, just because, if you get 2 bids that are $350 and one $750, it's much easier decision to make. Whereas if one is $350 and one is $700, it's kind of hard to overlook that. I know you guys met with them, but I just wonder if that's something that we have already done in the past, but we opted not to do it because of, lack of applications. Just curious, to explore that as well, to kind of make a little, not easier decision, but more sound decision on our end. And last thing I wanted to ask you is for the Route 9, there was a great news shared by Senator Ford about Dalby'sville area being done this spring. Have you been in touch with DelDOT about that?
Yeah, so they were at our meeting last week with the whole flood concerns, and they mentioned the project that they're working on, if they're gonna put a layer, a pervious layer, so that the water can go through the ground over, a portion of the road. So I think they're in their bidding phase for that project, and then I'm not sure when the work will begin, but hopefully sometime soon.
So this is something that we can expect come summer is resolved? more or
Yeah,
less.
I don't know.
And I'm looking over there too, just in case,
Yeah.
you cannot answer, but you
Yeah.
may be able to.
You said
Like some-
resolved?
Yeah.
Not resolved fully, but like this project being completed, the payment, like New Road being implemented. Is that a fair timeline, or is it, I don't wanna put, you can push
Yeah.
back and say, there's a lot of factor at play, I understand. Like,
Yeah, we don't have any direct control over DelDOT's contract. Full disclosure, we did the, design on behalf of DelDOT. So, I talked to our traffic engineers and it was all public information, but we don't have any control over, we just designed the project and we don't know, we don't have any control over DelDOT's bidding process or contracting process or the contract. So I don't know their schedule.
I guess where I'm going with that is, like during summer, this area is, like very congested. So
Yeah.
Chief, you can chime in there as well. Like what would be alternative if this was to be done, the work for this was to be done during summer? Like where are we deflecting traffic, especially people living there? How are we going around that? I guess that's kind of where I'm going with this, not necessarily that I wanted to be done by summer, but it's, once we have influx of travelers passing through our city, that's when I'm a little worried about additional work being done as well as that, so kind of like entire city kind of suffering even more, so just.
They usually, do factor those considerations into it, but we can certainly reach out to them to get a better gauge of when they're aiming to put this in, and remind them of the influx of traffic, which they are abundantly aware of. But just put that bug in their ear to say like, how can we work this out, on everyone's schedule, that way we're best serving the community.
Okay, thank you, that's my, I want it to be done ASAP, but I want to also be thoughtful in the sense that, it's not all at once and, we're crying all at once. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Anything else? Okay, thank Thank you. Chief McCain.
Good evening. I have a few things for council. And if you're following our Facebook page, you've probably seen some of this, but I wanted to start with the end of January 30th. We handled a death investigation. An adult male behind Walgreens was found in the wooded area. What we know to this point is that it was a homeless couple living in a tent behind Walgreens. They've been there for quite some time. The nature of his death is not suspicious in nature, but it's still under investigation with the ME's office. So once we have those results, we can act from those. On February 11th, right around 11 o'clock, our patrol officers were dispatched to a shooting in the Penn Valley area, Buttonwood area. 2 suspects were shot with non-life-threatening injuries. Our detectives with other agencies are working on that as well. We do know that we've got some folks in the area that are still canvassing, still trying to pull video. So if we have anybody that has video in that area or knows anything, we'd ask that you call, reach out to our detectives. February 14th, patrol officers witnessed a vehicle spinning its tires in the area of Newcastle Avenue, Buttonwood Avenue. Conducted a traffic stop, located a stolen firearm. Well, first identified some signs of intoxication. So you conducted an impaired driving evaluation, and as a result, located a stolen firearm, some drugs, and then obviously he was arrested for DUI. So it was a very good proactive police stop. Those are significant events this month. The only other thing I want to share is March 1st, not this Saturday, but the next Saturday, is our annual attack addiction run. As you all know, that gets at least a few thousand people in the city. And for a good 60 minutes, the city is surrounded. Right? So we do the best that we can for rolling openings and stuff like that. But for the most part, we're hard to get in and out of for an hour. So we'll do some more outreach leading up to it. Our Facebook page will have some things. We've done pretty good at identifying some of the businesses downtown that get affected. And so the advice is get in early. Registration's at 8 o'clock. The race doesn't start till 9. We don't shut the roads down until about 20 minutes before the race starts. That way we can run the course and make sure there's no obstructions or obstacles. So last, I have my annual report I'm working on right now. I was waiting on some data from Red Cap. Red Cap is they're the group that's monitoring our core program. So we have some good data from them right now. We're looking forward to putting that in our annual report. So that's my report to this point. If any questions?
Go ahead. Just one. Do you have any idea how many homeless camps are within the city?
Yeah, it's a great question. No, we don't, because they are transient. They're a lot more transient than we thought. So this group had been in there for, we think, about 6 months. But we are working with some state folks to help identify that, because that's a number that the state's trying to track as well. It was odd that we hadn't gotten any reports about them, to be honest with you. They were not visible from the railroad tracks, so we had to go back a ways to find them.
Is this the nonprofit, the authority that will be working to help identify, or the state agency? I know there's 2 different bodies, one doing point counts instead.
Well, our goal is to get them involved once we identify them. So, but then report to the state agency so that they can have the overall picture, because it does have impact on, on where some things get directed. But our goal is to absolutely, had we hypothetically known there were some folks back there and we identified some struggles with substance abuse or something like that, we could have offered, at least the contact with the CCD.
I was about to ask the same question, so I'm gonna not repeat that. My only other question I had was on the year-to-date crime statistics. Is the 2024 same month comparison, or is that a whole annual view? This is page 2.
So this is probably the first month. This is probably January to January,
Yes.
right?
So what I'm saying is, like, if I see 16 theft for 2025 in January, and then 21 in 2024, I'm assuming I'm comparing that to January 2024.
And yes. And which one are we looking at?
line, it's
Oh,
part one
theft,
perhaps?
yes, okay, yes,
So this is January to January.
Yes.
Comparison. I just wanted to say it's great to see decrease in that case of all part one, two, and three, so it's significant, especially as we go down to two and three, the amount of numbers, so thank you for, doing a great job in the community, we can see that here, that's amazing to see.
thank you.
For a second, I was worried that this was a whole year comparison, and that this was,
Yeah.
in my mind, but that's great.
Yeah, this is a really neat database to work with, so I can enter the numbers and run the comparison, so.
That's awesome.
Tells a good story.
So awesome.
Anything
Thank you.
else?
Chief, I just had one question. Last month you mentioned the new app that you and other agencies throughout the state are leveraging to connect with this new generation of candidates. And I think it's great. I was wondering, is there an ability for you to ask with your connections, or has there been any thought to it? And that is in regards to if that type of connection can be used for our fire and EMS to connect with this same new generation of candidates.
Absolutely. The relationship we're building with the companies that are doing this they're starting to recognize that we may have tripped over something that, at least in the police world, can become a national model. So there's no reason why this wouldn't work in fire and EMS. We are the guinea pigs, specifically the city. If you were to look at the data right now, we have a tremendous amount of candidates in the system right now that we really haven't interacted with. We're letting the company do this so that they can kind of work the gigs out. I'm probably, a week away from sending messages to them individually to thank them for their interest and then push them to the main site where they can have access to agencies that are struggling. So, we certainly, I can't see why this wouldn't work, really with anything, but specifically the fire and EMS. The marketing was a big part of this. That's what draws them to the site. And the fire departments are always, ahead of all of us when it comes to the marketing, so.
That's great.
Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, Chief. Council Communications, Ms. Padway, would you like to start?
Thank you, Council President. I'll be brief. Just wanted to thank Goodwill and every neighbor or person that came out last Saturday in respect to the blood donation drive. Over 18 people came out, and it was a success in respect to the blood bank of Delmarva. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zabaka?
Good evening, everybody. I feel like I already spoke a decent amount already. I wanted to thank Public Works for, all the snowstorms. I was returning from an airport recently through the snowstorm, so I could appreciate clean roads and people cleaning the road as you're driving. So it's amazing that, they can do all that and then also pick up your trash or recycle and address any issues in the city. So I'm sure they've been working overtime. This was said last night by President Sauter, but I wanted to thank the trust for working on the shoreline and rebuilding it. I already mentioned 88 sidewalk, and I just want to thank all the residents and employees and businesses who received the award last month. Thank you all. Today was visible of the involvement that the city has with its community and how we all benefit from your engagement with our community, and we honestly, in our capacity that we have, could not do everything that we need to do as a city without everybody's volunteering their knowledge, time, and expertise. I know, last thing I want to say is that I was and I was elected based on politics. I understand that, but I just wanted to say that I appreciate everybody's background, diversity, and this is what makes this town great. So I'll just, I think cultural diversity, ethnicity, religious background, age, gender background, all of these things that make us unique is who we are as human beings and who we have been living together with all millennials. So I just wanted to ask everybody to celebrate that in these times. So I hope, we don't get punished as a city for me even mentioning this, but I just wanted to tell everybody in Newcastle that we appreciate everybody's diversity, not on the council, city, but everybody in our community. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Zell?
I just have one item. I'd like to thank Rick Delgado from our Public Services. I don't know when it goes behind the senior center, there's a gravel road. I don't know if anyone knows the name of it. It's actually called Penn Street. And I'd like to thank him for filling in gravel there and the potholes. I don't know about you, I'm there every week doing Meals on Wheels, driving through, and when it rains, it's horrible, it gets my car dirty. So he filled in the potholes. There's still a couple there, but overall, it's a better ride, so I'd like to thank him for that.
Mr. Day.
Yeah, just a couple things. I am meeting with the city administrator and the trust this week for the bathrooms, so hopefully we can move that issue forward. I would also like to say I signed up this past weekend for Code Red. I got my first text message and email today, so it was very helpful. So if you haven't signed up, please do. It kind of keeps you informed of what's going on in the city, but very helpful. And the last one, I'd like to echo Councilman Zubaka's words to thank Public Works. It's been frigid the past couple months with the snow and everything else. They've done a great job. So again, it's a big deal for the city to have clean streets and to be able to operate safely. So thank you.
Thank you. I only have one thing too, in addition to Public Works. I also want to thank the residents who cleared the sidewalks in front of their houses, because that makes it easier for all of us to get around. And also those who helped out their neighbors who perhaps due to age or physical health problems or even just being away. If you clean your neighbor's sidewalk, it makes it better for all of us. It is a requirement that everybody clear their walks, and it's nice when we help each other. So, thank you. Mayor here.
As we know, government often moves very slowly. A great example of this is back on April 4th of 2022, we had our first meeting for the Route 9 improvement project. And we had a site visit on May 18th, 2022 with fire and police chiefs, DelDOT, Senator Poore, and some others. I'd just like to point out that Russ Smith and I, well, Russ and I were both leaders on that project, and it's taken 3 years. So hopefully it gets paved. I will tell you that it's not gonna eliminate all flooding, but it should minimize the flooding. And that is from the Deemers Beach parking lot, or the fishing, what will hopefully be the fishing pier parking lot, down to Grantham Lane is where they're placing this new impervious layer. On January 30th, Council President Souter and City Administrator and I had a Zoom call with Go Rail, which represents our freight train travel through the city, and we specifically brought up quiet zones. We're waiting for some contact information from this person, and unfortunately the one that we could have talked to went out on maternity leave, so she's trying to get us somebody else. But we followed that on February 13th with a webinar on quiet crossings. And it's not simple, and it's very costly. And you don't go for quiet crossings first, because all of our railroad crossings have to meet the current safety standards. So Washington Street does have arms, but do they meet current standards? We don't know. South Street does not have anything. Ferry Cutoff, we are getting, hopefully in the next few months. And near the trolley barn, there is no arms. So it's expensive. It's I think the amount that they talked about, and they can correct me, was somewhere around 800,000 to $1 million plus for each crossing, just to bring it up to safety standards. You don't talk about quiet crossings with the railroad until your crossings meet the safety standards. So we will be looking there. are grants everywhere, and I know that we will be looking at grants to try to help with this process. But again, this process is just starting, and it will probably take a lot longer than Route 9. And in closing, I just want to remind everybody about Restaurant Week, which is coming off February 26th to March 2nd. So if, take a look at, there'll be signs going up tomorrow, posters. I apologize for the delay. I was in California, and then as with everybody else, I've been sick. So the posters will go up tomorrow. So be sure to support your local businesses. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? For the quiet zones, or whatever the formal name is, I think, well, we had a community meeting organized by Mimi and Nicole, Senator representatives. I think at that time, Mr. Platt mentioned that we may have applied, but got denied in the past. And
We have never applied.
Oh, we never applied.
We have never applied. You have to have the safety standards.
I was just about to ask, how do we apply
Yeah.
without standards
Right.
at the time?
We have
Maybe
never
that's the
applied.
reason for not getting it, okay.
No.
So
Safety standards have to be there first before you can even go ahead with in fact, we were specifically told, don't mention that you want to do this for quiet crossings, because that won't get you anywhere.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, I figured you were counsel at that time, so, thanks.
Will. Chief Maewski, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Start with our annual report for January. Bear with me here, it's been a long day. We've had 196 EMS responses over the month of January, which is pretty high for us. Traditionally, we're hanging out in the 150s, 160s. In addition, we had 124 fire rescue type responses for the month. We did have a handful of working fires in there, motor vehicle accident with entrapment, some other incidents. So we've, again, stayed pretty busy. Wanted to give a quick update today. Obviously, everyone saw the code red notification about the marine fire in the Delaware River. At 09:39 hours this morning, we were alerted for a fire on board a tugboat in the Delaware River in the area of Penns Beach. For those not familiar, Penns Beach is essentially off of Grantham Lane equivalency, on the New Jersey side of the jetty. There was 4 persons on board the tugboat who did not have any fire suppression equipment on board or anything like that. The fire was reported to be in the engine room, so they initiated their distress call to the Coast Guard, triggered the response from us, and then starts trickling down from there. Shortly after I arrived on scene, all of our units were coming from another incident, so travel time back to Newcastle and then to the boat. We had received information from the Coast Guard that the members on the tugboat had a quote-unquote abandoned ship. What they ended up doing was moving from the tugboat to the barges that they were pushing that were thankfully empty mud barges that were on their way back to Norfolk after a dredge project up in Philly. Thankfully, 2 Good Samaritan tugs in the area were able to assist them. Both were transiting the area as well. The tugboat that was on fire, the Thor, motor vessel Thor, had lost all power and steering, so they were adrift in the channel in the area of the high tension power lines on their way to Jersey. So this was a great recipe for an overwhelming disaster. Thanks to them, they were able to hook up to the barges and push the vessel back up into the area of the Newcastle Flats, so north of Bull Hill, south of the bridge, and they were able to get the vessel secured there. We had a lot of resources respond over, actually I say over, 10 vessels were ultimately made the response, including Wilmington Fire Department Fireboat 7 and Philadelphia Fire Department Marine 1. So both of those assets were on scene. They initiated a attack into the engine room and were able to successfully extinguish the fire. Again, we had an overwhelming amount of resources. I'm not going to list them out for you here now just to save everybody's time because it is an extensive list. But that was the extent of the incident. From dispatch, we were about 90 minutes to extinguishment. Some of the issues we faced were obviously weather and icing conditions. If anybody is following some of the photographers on social media, you've seen the blowout tides in the last few days, so we had a lot of problems getting the small boats into the water. So we were able to overcome that, but it took time. So nonetheless, that was that incident. The good news is that the captain of the vessel had a plan in place already for moving, and the vessel is already clear of our area. The barges are on their way back to Philly, and the tugboat that was on fire is on its way back to Norfolk. So, any questions about that or the general report?
Any questions? I saw the ambulances going down 3rd Street, so I'm glad to hear that no one was hurt.
Yes, there was no injuries to either the crew or to any rescuers or anything like that. So if I could take a moment, I did want to follow up on Councilman Madaway's question to Chief McCabe. So the DVFA, the Delaware Volunteer Firemen's Association or Firefighters Association, which is like our statewide parent agency, 2 years ago received a grant for recruitment and retention, and there's a similar platform, kind of. It's a generic recruiting type thing. All the submissions go to one point of contact, and then they get distributed out. We've been lucky to receive about a dozen of those requests for information or curiosity about membership or anything like that. The problem is that unfortunately a lot of people, I think, hit the send me information or they fill it out quickly, and every person we've contacted and followed up with again doesn't call back. So, and I don't know what the rhyme or the reason is. Unfortunately, it's something that we're finding not only with volunteering, but with employment in this generation too. We have people who beat down our door to work for us and never work a shift once they get signed up. So I don't know where the disconnect in the generation lies, but so there is something like that in place though, and we're utilizing it to the best of our ability.
I'm gonna guess it's the case with other departments too, but have you talked to other chiefs in part of this, using this app, whether they have any more success than you have had, reaching out through specifically this app?
It's pretty much, no, it's pretty consistent across the board. I mean, some people, we've been able to get 1 or 2 members in the door, but most of them, we'll email, we'll try to follow up with phone calls on the phone numbers provided, leave voicemails, send follow-up emails, we get no information, no contact back.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, and I mean, we're doing everything we can, but handing them the pen and holding it for them, so, but, yep. So, like I said, there is something in place. But, thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, public comments is next. The usual rules, please sign the list and then say your name and address. You have 3 minutes. If you ask a basic question that we can answer quickly, we will, but we cannot engage in extensive discussions of any issue that's not on the agenda. So it may seem like we're not paying attention, but it just means it's not the right time and place for us to respond. Oh, and please speak into the microphone so everyone can hear you. And you can move it wherever it works for you.
Good evening. My name is Brenda Graves, and I live in Bluecoats. And the first thing I'd like to do is to thank the city solicitor and Ms. Antonio, because I can't pronounce your last name yet, and the mayor for responding to me. City solicitor gave me some good information, which is going to send me back someplace I need to revisit. Antonio was very kind to me when I went to City Hall. She was on her way to a meeting, and she stopped to speak to me, to address me. She didn't get back to me, but at least she stopped and acknowledged me. And first of all, and the mayor, when I sent her an initial request, she responded back to me and gave me some really good information, which I'm still trying to muddle through. So I want to thank the 3 of them publicly. 3 minutes is not enough time. So the next thing I wanted to do was to reiterate my request that we have some type of investigation and audit of the Boothurst Maintenance Corporation. I came to City Council because I was referred to City Council. 25 years ago when I moved to Newcastle, we had a water problem. The gentleman that lived behind me came to City Council. City Council and the mayor came and dug up my property. They had an excavator, the excavator shaved off the back of my property and made a swale. And that was supposed to resolve the water problem. I didn't have a water problem. My basement wasn't leaking. So that wasn't my issue. He was on a slab, so he had the issue. But he came to the city and the city helped him. And that's why I came, because I was referred to the city. They told me to go to the city and I thought the city was gonna do something. Boothurst is a hot mess. And it has been for 25 years. These people are doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing. I'm getting old. I'm a cancer survivor. I have a chronic disease. All I have is my house. The maintenance fee is too high. There are other people that have the same problem. I walked the community. These other people didn't. I walked the community. I talked to my neighbors. I'm here to represent them. We need some help. And I'm expecting somebody from City Council to come out to my neighborhood and talk to the people. I invited y'all to the annual meeting and only Frank Cook showed up. And he missed the Temptations, and I'm sorry. You guys didn't show up. We need help. I'm going back to Chris at the Department of Justice. And I'm gonna go to Matt Myers and whoever I have to go to. We need this Boothurst Maintenance Court fixed. And I'm asking you again to please come help us. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Phil Gross, 1301 13th Street. As President Souter said, this is election time, a time of reflection, projects completed, not completed. So I'm asking people to throw your hat in the ring if you think you can make a difference. If you can't, please tell your neighbors, discuss this. Because the incumbents that are running, I've said over and over, they're ill-equipped. They're not in touch with the facts, statistics, and I'm just asking that people take control of your city. This is your city. I'm happy to see everybody's here, but we only make up a small part of it. Picnic tables for the summer, if somebody could do it, because they were taken down for COVID, which is understandable. But last summer I brought it up 6 times. Then it was a question, trustees or us, council. Well, please resolve it before the summer. Let's not have this subject brought up again midsummer. Why haven't they been put out? Flood resiliency, as I brought up at their meeting, over 2 years, no accomplishments. They'll tell you we're getting closer. I've talked to at least 4 or 5 legislators. None of them, especially with what's going on now in government, none of them said any big funds will be coming our way for at least 3 to 5 years. They can talk, they can say what they want, but it's a pipe dream. There is no money. Then comes the problem with our city doesn't have enough residents to make the state worthwhile to give us money. or if there's a total tidal wave, the destruction is not enough to make it worth them giving us money. Last but not least, I think we should be allowed to speak for 5 minutes, not just 3. Cut the agenda back from ending at 9:30, which it's been for the last 5 meetings. Let us have our moment to express ourselves. Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
I agree with the 5-minute rule too, by the way. It was my idea first, though. Let's talk into this. Is this working? I guess it is. Okay. Rod Miller, East 3rd Street. I just wanted to bring up something I've brought up in the past. It's been a while though, so some of you on council now, may not remember, and some people in the audience may not be familiar. But I want to bring up again my request that the City Council adopt an ordinance that would ban the conversion of single-family homes into multiple unit apartments. And this has been done so many places. I brought this up years ago. In fact, former attorney, Mr. Alasko, one meeting, when there seemed to be some confusion about things I was saying, stated that he said, well, Mr. Miller is perfectly right. It's the council's decision. You can pass such an ordinance, just have a public hearing. Every town I've heard of that I've talked to in Delaware, east and northern Delaware and South Jersey has already passed ordinance like this. Multiple reasons why it's a positive thing. The higher your percentage of owner occupation, better off your city is. Those are just the numbers. Higher your quality of life. It's just an across the board thing. It's really not open to debate. Luckily here, as far as I can see anyway, there haven't been any real problems with any tenants, but I've got a ton of them on my street, and at the very least, it causes parking issues. Parking's at a premium as it is, and I've got like 18 renters across the street from me, and only 2 or 3 of them have really been there the whole time I've been here. That's just the nature of renting. There's nothing wrong with it, but the nature of renters is that they're younger, transient, they come and they go. They come and they go all the time. Okay, it doesn't really help the city any. You're not making any more money because of this. It certainly doesn't help the neighborhoods, particularly where most of us on my block and a lot of streets in town are row houses, where very few properties have off-street parking, and it just creates a mess. Parking is a disaster on my street. I have brand new next door neighbors. They couldn't believe that people are tires are up on the sidewalk. The parking is atrocious. And the main reason, of course, is because we have more cars than we can accommodate. Okay, so I'd like to hear a good reason why we haven't done this. What's special about Newcastle that we haven't even entertained this, as a city council, when every other town that I've spoken to, and feel free to reach out and contact them yourself. I was responsible for getting an ordinance like this passed in my town in South Jersey when I found out that almost every other town in South Jersey had already done it. They'd seen the problems with it. Okay, in some cities it's worse than others because of the nature of the kind of people they get to rent there. Luckily, so far anyway, knock on wood, we haven't had that issue, but at the very least the issue is parking. You're squeezing more people and more vehicles into a smaller area. Okay, so please consider this, and if you do decide to talk about it and maybe have an ordinance and have a public hearing, I've stated this before and I'll stick by it. I can't imagine anybody coming here and protesting against it. I really can't. And if anybody does, send them to me, okay? And I'll send them straight.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Hi everyone, my name's James Edgerton. I own the Terry House and 2 Airbnbs on Delaware Street. This is my first council meeting, so I'll do my best here. I wrote my speech while I was sitting down. So I own 2 Airbnbs on Delaware Street and the Terry House. I love the historic town and wanted to grow and thrive. I made $60,000 last year in 2024 in revenue, which would come out to be about $1,800 in tax revenue if there was a 3% tax on short-term rentals. However, if an extra tax is passed I will most likely convert the 2 Airbnbs to long-term rentals, not because of only the tax, but because Airbnbs is a tough business. It is expensive and hard to manage, and especially right now, Airbnbs don't seem to be renting out as much as they used to. I truly believe losing these Airbnbs would be harder on the business revenue and increase property values in the city than the $1,800 additional tax revenue. This city really needs tourism to support the local businesses. All of my customers go to Jessup, Solly's, and Mercury Tea House, and more. Businesses and short-term rentals are what help to drive the increased property values, which results in overall higher taxes for the city. I would encourage the city to look into other alternatives for tax revenues. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is. Dennis Young from 12 West 5th Street, and especially Mozart Gallery at 1 East 2nd Street. I have some prepared comments too, but I'm letting those go because of the time, and also because of mentioning Jim Wisman going to the airport. Well, my wife and I Ubered up to Philadelphia Airport a couple weeks ago to go on vacation. And I got my receipt later on after we had gotten to Florida. And I looked to see that on our $72, $73 trip to Philadelphia Airport, there was a $4.35 drop-off fee at the Philadelphia Airport. I think that's a fee that we paid, or an Uber driver, or Uber people paid for, that the guy in the car behind who was just bringing in his son to go back to college didn't have to pay. Why? I don't know. Cynically, I would say because Uber has the money. And my skepticism, my caution about this proposed tax on rental units, but also the wage tax on employees and a tax on owners of the businesses, is because that's where the money is. Seems to be a bit unfair that going after it, you're targeting one group of people who are trying to make something happen in Newcastle. It's difficult to do that, targeting that group of people to help to support worthy causes, of course, but there have to be other ways to do that other than this. There's a perception a lot of times that, and in this city too, that business owners are wealthy, and you know, we have to have the rich pay their fair share. Well, I'm not one of those wealthy business owners. I don't know who is, but I know there are a lot of hard-working business owners who bring a lot of value to the city, not just in what they offer in restaurants or in shops, but sort of things they do volunteer-wise, like what Dwayne Foster does for the block party for the senior center every September. So I would just ask the council to please give consideration to mom and pop shops and put this resolution, proposed resolution to employ this tax to bed. Thank you.
Anybody else?
My name's David Connell, where I live over to in a minute. Mr. Tantillo, did I say that right?
Tantillo.
Tantillo. I have 4 requests that are 9 weeks old. I was looking at them today. I'm really not happy with the way they're written, so I'm gonna withdraw those. I'll have to rewrite the whole thing in itemized fashion, separate everything, and I'll resubmit them, and I'll try to have it to you by Sunday.
Sure.
Okay, where I live is 725 Clymer Street, I guess you could say that. I want to give you some real quick history on it. I come home November 2021. Walk up my backyard, try to get my back door, I look to the right, and I see a backfilled foundation.
I'm like, that's interesting, because I'm pretty much an expert in construction trade. I said, that's gonna be a funny looking addition. So I walked over to the contractor, I said, yo, bud, did you get that inspected? He blows up, he starts losing it, cussing me out in Spanish. I just walked away from him, so I don't wanna deal with no foreign nationals, cussing at me in Spanish, but I told him, I said, you damaged my house, I'm gonna sue you. So that was November 2021. What has happened since then? Well, I've been set up, basically, walked to an ambush, and I was kidnapped, and the ransom that had to be paid to get out of these kidnappers was to be threatened, terrorized, and tortured. It went on for 6 months. During that time, basically my retirement's been wiped out. My trade's been absolutely annihilated. My career is destroyed. My house is pretty much, I'm creating a fire break. 2/3 of my upstairs is getting walled off by concrete, wallboard overlapped. So I'll have a fire break up there and I only have a 1-bedroom house after that point. I lose at least $100,000 a year in wages and benefits from losing basically my career. Kind of things happen. As a side note, right after the kidnapping, you lost your city solicitor. Apparently he wasn't too happy with it. The oddest thing about it, this has happened before, back in 2003, 2015, I had to endure what I believe is an attempt on my life. I guess you call it lawfare. You know, basically they lie about you, try to get you in the court system and put you in a gulag. I will not survive in prison. So that'd be the 5th time this has happened. It started in 2003. Do I think it's accidental? No, I don't. I went through that in December, I think. So, why am I here all the time? Because I have basically it's like a Banana Republic type quality structure. It's 3 stories high. It towers over my house, and I believe it to be basically an incendiary time bomb. It's big enough to burn down the entire city block. That's why I'm here all the time. Have a very nice night.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. The next item is a resolution to approve the audit report with submission of our audit for fiscal year 2024, which we received earlier this evening. I'll read the very brief resolution 2025-14. Whereas the firm of Wisman, Giordano and Associates completed the fiscal year 2024 financial audit, and their representative has reviewed the draft audit with City Council at a public meeting held on, well, it says Tuesday, February 11th. We're gonna have to change that to the 18th because the meeting had to be rescheduled. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council hereby approves the fiscal year 2024 financial audit. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
Motion to approve resolution 2025-14 with the date change.
Okay, thank
Second.
you. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the resolution is approved. The next item is a resolution to confirm an appointment to the Planning Commission. Resolution 2025-17, a resolution to confirm the mayor's appointment of Mark Anthony Williams to the Planning Commission. Whereas the Newcastle City Code provides that the mayor of the city of Newcastle appoint 9 members to the Planning Commission subject to confirmation by City Council, each for 3-year terms. And whereas there are currently 2 vacated positions on the Planning Commission, and whereas City Council proposes to confirm the appointment of Mark Anthony Williams to fulfill the expired term of Vera Worthy, with that term ending February 11th, 2028. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council hereby appoints the following person to the Planning Commission. Mark Anthony Williams, Planning Commission, term ending February 11th, 2028. Mr. Williams is unable to be with us this evening. He sent some information about his background for council to review. Many of you may know he's the chef owner of Zolly's Restaurant, which has been here in Newcastle for 3 years, and he has prior work at restaurants and Christina School District. Is there a motion to approve this appointment?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion's approved.
Can I make one, to pass a second, to amend, the term would end February 18th,
Oh,
2020.
excuse, okay, so there's two clerical corrections. We're passing it on February 18th, so the term ends February 18th of 2028.
Motion to pass it as with date
amended.
changes.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The next item is a resolution for a re-subdivision of the Riverbend community, which Mr. Rogers, our city planner, is going to talk to us about. Council's been given, what, 6 maps, I think, 6 or 7 maps, but we need some explanation.
Thank you, Madam President, members of council. What you have in front of you is a re-subdivision plan for the Riverbend subdivision. The purpose of the re-subdivision plan is noted in the top left-hand corner of sheet R1, the very first page of the re-subdivision plan. And simply, the purpose is to add various on-lot drainage and utility easements. There's no lot line adjustments being proposed in this plan. There's certainly no new development being proposed as a result of this re-subdivision plan. Antonina and I met with the engineer, and there were some storm drain pipes that were missed when the original plans were recorded, that are storm drain pipes that drain the public street, and the maintenance corporation needs to get on private lots in order to access those drainage pipes that drain the public street. You had seen a previous re-subdivision plan for the subdivision last year that adjusted several lot lines. But this is, for lack of a better term, less complicated, and it's adding a few easements on, for example, sheet R2. You'll see sort of in the middle top of the page, 10-foot drainage utility easement, or drainage easement typical near lot 50 and lot 40, and that's what's occurring here. These streets are private, as you know. These drainage easements are also private, but would allow a third party, as approved by the community, to access those pipes in the event that maintenance is needed.
So we're adding the drain pipes or changing or correcting the ones that are already there?
They are adding easements
To allow access.
over top of existing storm drain pipes, as we understand it. And we did not go out there and do any inspections to confirm the location of these pipes. This is a private street, private pipes. If your subdivision regulations allow for re-subdivision plans that are of this nature, that are adjusting lot lines and that don't create any new development potential to be approved administratively. So this was not reviewed by the Planning Commission. This was reviewed by myself and Ms. Tantillo to make sure that everything was in order.
Okay.
Just a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
So, as I understand it, it's existing stormwater, we're just adding the easement onto the lots. Are the lots privately owned already, or are they owned by Freedom Development?
I do not know the answer to that. Another thing that this does is this updates some of the development owner situation or the lot owner situation on the last sheet. So I believe that these easements are being proposed in areas where the lots are going to be transferred in blocks to a builder.
Okay, so they're the unbuilt lots?
Correct.
Okay. And then does the developer still control 50% of this development?
I don't know, Mr. Day.
Sorry, say that again?
Does the developer control 50% of this development?
I'm not sure, sorry, I'll get you the answer.
Can you speak more to, I don't know how many units currently there are, but what is gonna happen? Like, are those being approached privately because they're already owned by somebody living there and we don't have authority? You know, this wouldn't apply to them is what you're saying, but I'm still guessing they need access at those properties as well, similar to what is being proposed here. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, I'm used to public streets and public easements. So these are private streets and private easements. And just like if you owned, if this was a public street situation that were being, and the streets were being dedicated to the city, we would ensure that the storm drain pipes that drained the public right of way, that was in the public interest, that the city needed to gain access to, had easements on them, even though there are, these are pipes that are on private lots. So you need to have an easement to access the pipes that are on private lots. These are private streets, private pipes, but they are draining the private streets, so whoever the community has in charge of maintaining the streets has to maintain the private pipes, so they need to get access onto private individual lots every now and then.
And is that kind of, my next question was, why wasn't this done initially, but is that the answer, like because it's a private road and we don't necessarily deal with that often, so that's why this wasn't from the get-go planned as an easement? Like, is that?
According to the engineer, they just missed a few pipes where they should have had easements on it when it was originally recorded. If this was a public street situation, it would have been sort of our responsibility to make sure that all the appropriate easements were in place. I don't know how long ago this was recorded, but these are private streets, private easements. There's no city implications at this point.
Thank you.
So this is only a fraction of the total drainage pipes in this development that we're dealing with tonight, because the other ones already have the easements. Do I understand that correctly?
I don't know about a fraction, but it was
It's
the
a
way the
portion.
engineer described it. There was a couple pipes that we.
They missed them.
Yes.
I mean, I know this development's been kind of fraught. It's changed hands several times, and so that probably added to the confusion.
It may have.
Has this gone before the Board of Adjustment? Or no, this is a matter of just council?
No, certainly not Board of Adjustment and not even the Planning Commission, because this is defined as a re-subdivision, which is defined in your subdivision regulations, which is a subdivision that does not create any new development potential. And as a result, it can be reviewed administratively and approved administratively with ministerial approval by City Council, which is what your role is here tonight. And if it's approved, it has to be recorded in a court of in the land records.
Any other questions for Mr. Rogers? Are we ready for the motion?
And same date issue.
Oh, okay, yes. Okay. So I'll read the resolution, 2025-15, a resolution approving a subdivision of Riverbend at Old Newcastle. Whereas Freedom Development LLC has applied to the City of Newcastle for re-subdivision approval for properties located in the Riverbend at Old Newcastle subdivision in the City of Newcastle. And whereas the purpose of the re-subdivision is to modify or add on-lot drainage and utility easements on several lots and to reflect updated property owner information. And whereas the building official has determined that the subject re-subdivision entitled Re-Subdivision of Riverbend at Old Newcastle, prepared by Civil Engineering Associates, dated January 20th, 2025, and attached hereto as Exhibit A, is in conformity with the subdivision regulations of the City of Newcastle, and recommends to City Council that the re-subdivision be approved. Now therefore be it resolved that the application of Freedom Development LLC for re-subdivision approval of Riverbend at Old Newcastle within the city limits as shown by the plat prepared by Civil Engineering Associates dated January 20th, 2025, and attached hereto as Exhibit A, reflecting such re-subdivision, is approved, and such plat shall be entitled to be recorded in the office of the Newcastle County Recorder of Deeds, and we need to correct the date. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So move.
Is there a second? Second? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Pardon me, the next item concerns the establishment of a City of Newcastle Legacy Fund with the Delaware Community Foundation. Mr. Mataway, would you like to talk to us about this?
Thank you, Council President. So this is a follow-up. 2 months ago, we had a presentation by a leadership individual from the Delaware Community Foundation. They made a presentation, left council, city administrator, and city solicitor a packet of information in respect to the next steps in establishing a legacy fund. The legacy fund would be an alternative, new, additional, innovative revenue stream that the city currently does not have access to. Currently, right now, the city just has checking and savings accounts. If someone came down and said, I want to give the city stocks, for example, the city does not have a mechanism to receive that. This Delaware Legacy Fund would allow people, individuals from Newcastle to New Delhi, to donate in a philanthropic way to the city where the city is the beneficiary. The ask of council today is to give city administrator permission to move forward with the establishment of the fund. The fund has a minimum balance of $25,000. Individuals have the ability to give directly to the city, or when the account is established, they have the ability to give directly to the fund. When giving to the city and then the city establishes the funds, the city has the ability to request a distribution effectively for any of those types of funds. When funds are given directly from an individual to the community foundation, again, it's for the benefit of the city as the beneficiary. However, the purpose of the fund is perpetuity, and that's the purpose of this city, perpetuity. And so there's an analysis based upon the overall value of the fund that the Delaware Community Foundation would allow based upon the preservation needs of the fund in a given year. The city has an ability to withdraw the funds, or it could pass it over and roll the funds forward, continue to invest. This is something that is allowed within the city charter, and so I just give this over to City Council for commentary and hopefully a vote. The city has already received an anonymous donation of $10,000 in respect to seed money. The Delaware Community Foundation would work with the city in respect to marketing, etc. So I'll just stop there.
Okay, thank you. I guess I have a couple of questions. If we set this up, would we specify what it would be used for? I mean, to me, it wouldn't make any sense just to pull it out and put it in the general revenue stream. It would be used for infrastructure or some special project or something of that nature. So that would be part of the enabling legislation that we would have to pass to set this up?
Yes, so what Councilman Mataway is asking for tonight is to give you the authority to pursue this opportunity and to work on with Councilman Mataway and with the TCF and with our attorney to determine the parameters of our fund with, the different, I know that Ms. Peraza, who came to the last meeting, she talked about how you can specify for parks, or you can do this or that. There are plenty of different options that we could look into. But however we'd like to set it up, as Mr. Malloy said, it would be in perpetuity. So this is a big decision to be made, and we definitely wanna conduct research and see if this is something we wanna pursue, and determine what parameters we'd like to establish.
So what we're asking tonight is to authorize you to explore it, but not to actually set it up, is that
Right.
correct?
Well, it's up to you. You can do both. So we can authorize me to explore it and come back with the parameters to be approved at a later date, with the intention of approving something.
Okay. And then my other question is, I looked through the material we have here, and it doesn't make any mention of fees. But when I went on their website, I had to dig down a ways, but I found it. There's a table of fees, and they charge, it depends on the amount in the fund. The more that's in the fund, the lower your percentage you have to pay. For assets up to $1 million, which I imagine that would be us for a while, it's 1% per year with a minimum fee of $250 a year for their management of the fund.
Right.
So if we can't even establish it with the 10,000 that we have, because they have a minimum investment requirement of 25, is that right?
So what they're saying and what they've said is that they would allow the city to sign an agreement, say 90 days, to get to that $25,000 threshold, to be a receptacle to receive funds, to give potential donors the flexibility of giving directly to the city or directly to the fund. And I know this was from the last meeting. I believe there was a section that talked about fees. But you're right in respect to the indicated tiered fee schedule, which is commensurate with the market.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a few. So, I do like the idea, I think it's a great idea, but I do have some questions. So, if we, I hear we have 10,000, and if the city wanted to commit the other 15,000, I'm assuming that would be a budget amendment.
Yes.
I don't think we could just move to 15,000. And again, I think it's a great idea. So I assume they manage, and this is an interest-bearing, at least an interest-bearing account or an invested account. So, is that right?
Yes, Councilman Day, that is correct. All of the funds would be invested with some type of cash allocation. There's 3 different types. I think their most notable one for entities of our type, et cetera, is what they call the flagship fund. That talks about capital preservation as its mandate investment.
Well, my point with all that was that you would assume if it's a managed fund, obviously there's years you take a loss, but you would expect that you would make up the 1% fee that they're charging for management of it. I think the other thing that she had talked about, as an individual, I can direct, I believe, my donation where I want it to. So in saying that, if the city says, okay, we're gonna use this fund for whatever, parks and libraries or whatever, and I say, I wanna donate 10,000, but I want it to be, to improve the streets. Like, how does, or
So
does
they
the city
can-
just put up an overly broad,
That's not
category?
true. So they can direct their funds within the parameters of whatever fund you establish. So if we have a broad category, then we can do that. But if we have a park category, battery park category, playground, anything, then you can direct it towards that. So if we make it as broad as we want to, it can be more general, but we can also make it more direct.
So Councilman Mataway, I hear what you're saying about taking the 10 and then having 90 days. Are you talking about like having like a public drive and try and get people to donate so we can get the 25,000? Or are you looking for the city to put up the other 15 so we can get the 25 and then open it up?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would be in support of the city putting up the extra 15. I would, again, the city right now just has money in their checking and savings accounts. It's probably getting less interest than it would had it, $15,000 be invested. And the city would have the ability to essentially draw that back in, because the city would be contributing those funds. So it literally would just essentially create an extra bucket on Mr. Wisman's presentation, if it's formatted in that way or some other. And you're absolutely right in respect to the city being able to drive the purpose of the fund. A lot of times you try to go as broad as possible. This may seem weird, but something like health maintenance, education, and support of the city of Newcastle, which is the beneficiary, codifies everything, right? What, maintenance of the city, health, support of the city. That could be, as you can see.
I guess another question is, I've been familiar with nonprofit organizations, the church, or arts institution, whatever, a museum has endowments. And usually they set up a policy of they're going to draw out such a set percentage, and usually they do of a 3-year rolling average of the income to account for the years. I mean, in some years the stock market does great and you make a ton of money, and then the next year the stock market crashes and you lose money. And so if you take out your percentage based on a rolling average, you kind of smooth out those bumps. But the goal is for the principal to grow. So you can't just like take it all out every year. So this is not something that's going to give immediate income to the city, because if we do that, it defeats the purpose. It won't allow the fund to grow. The interest on $25,000 is not going to be a whole lot. And so if we start pulling it out as soon as we put it in, I don't see the purpose.
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying when the city deposits the money into the account, it's a main and sub account essentially. When the city is the depositor, the city has the ability to recoup everything that gets deposited in that manner.
So
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so if we deposit the 15 now, just to bring it up to the minimum 25, and then a year from now, enough other people have contributed that we have more than 25, then we could take our 15 back.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it'd be like a seed money, in a way.
Yes.
I will say the one thing that I like about it is, with the state planning and people giving large donations, this is an avenue for the city to recoup, I want to say recoup, to take donations, especially like you said, stocks, bonds, legacy donations, I think it's a great idea.
And I'll give an example, and this is recently as this summer. So we all know Mayor Leary and Mr. Reeves, who's in the crowd, helped spearhead the Now Trinidad. We all, many people, solicited companies for donations in that effort. I personally found some companies who said, hey, it sounds great. We just don't give money to cities because they think cities might take it, put it in the general fund, use it for things like payroll. So this creates a mechanism where you could, in that instance, we could have said, hey, don't give it to us, give it to our 501c3. It's for the benefit of the city.
Oh, go ahead.
So if our start is for $25,000, does that mean we have to keep 25,000 so then anything over is what we can use? Because it seems like we have the base to start us up, and that's always going to have to be there. Is that correct?
So
I thought it said you could go down to 10.
So the purpose is perpetuity. There are things called small trust terminations, essentially, where it is no longer financially feasible to maintain or to keep certain funds invested into the stock market, for example. Again, it depends on how the funds are flowed. If the city is the depositor, the city can take back everything. If you deposit $1 million and say, city only use it for parks, then the city can only use it for parks. Am I not understanding?
No, it's not. To me, it's like we have to start the fund for 25,000 and we have to keep that as our starting balance. And so any over 25,000 then we can use for other things. But according to this, it sounds like we have to start at 25,000 if I'm correct.
There's a start of 25,000, it says.
So can we go below that?
Yes, you can.
You can go below, but then when I referenced the small trust termination thing kicks in potentially. So for example, you can go below it, but if you had $500, how many stocks can they buy for $500? And is their 1% fee then worth what they're investing?
I wanted to just thank you, Councilperson Mataway, for thinking of this resource for the city and a way to kind of test out investment waters, that are not something that we've done here. So it's absolutely one of those things where, what my colleagues have said, it may work, it may not work, depending on the fiscal year, but, we all have our investment accounts that, over time, generally outperform, like most times than not, you will earn, annually, some sort of, revenue on what you invested. So, I feel comfortable, even as a city, investing 25,000 and keeping it in this fund, if that means that we can, I think this is one of those visionary things where, we're setting ourselves for, a success, not just people in the room, but residents, future residents of this town, generations to come, where, they'll have this avenue to invest various different things that they're not able to invest, or give to the city. I think we do have a strong connection with the city, with people living here, so that this is one of those ways where people can, give back if they want to. So I applaud this effort. I would be willing to support city administrator in these efforts to continue, and Councilperson Mataway. So thank you guys for bringing this up.
I think the idea has promise. Before I'd be willing to vote to do it, I would like to have a lot more detail fleshed out as to how we would define where the money would go, and a plan for how we would, a planned withdrawals. In other words, that we wouldn't just willy-nilly, oh, well, let's take $10,000 out of that fund to fix up the park or whatever. We would do what I talked about with the rolling average and the set percentage, so that your principal grows, because otherwise that kind of defeats the purpose of this sort of fund as I understand it. So would it be possible for us tonight to agree for Ms. Tantillo to talk with DCF and work out more details? I'm sure other places, they have templates for how other places have set up this sort of fund, and come back to us with more details before we make a formal approval of doing it? Is that something we could do?
I would just wonder if I can make a slight modification to that. So, again, we can do whatever the council wishes. Can we ask or give permission for Ms. Tantillo to work, and if our legal representatives are in agreement with what is presented, to work to open the account, and then next council meeting, we put on the agenda to codify a resolution that the city will not make any withdrawals for 1 year, 2 years, for example. And that then would...
That would certainly help, but I guess before I'm willing to commit $15,000, I'd like to have more details.
Details?
Of how it would be used and how it would be spent, and our plan for expending it with the goal of growing the principal over the long term, so that 5, 10 years from now, 15 years from now or more, it may be a substantial fund to enable the city to do things it wouldn't otherwise be able to afford to do. But to commit the money, frankly, on this fairly sketchy information, I'm not comfortable with doing that and what you've given us is fine, but we have to make the decision as to what we want to do and how we want to manage it. And I would like to see us make that decision before we commit the money. That's my view. I don't know what the rest of you think.
Regarding the kind of like allowed uses of money, my thought was something that was discussed already, like a more vague approach of, well-being of the city, maintenance, whatnot, so that, we're not limiting donors to say, oh, I wanted to donate, but city has prescribed only these 3 uses. So I think leaving it vague would probably be something that would be opening up more donations than not, because if somebody wants to donate to replace a podium and we don't have it in there, it's still a welcome money, in my opinion, right? Like that we should limit somebody, a silly example, but you see where I'm going with that. So I think that aspect of it, I'm not too worried about, because, I presume there's gonna be a large chunk of the money that we can use in general fund, but also a lot of it being kind of like endowment setup where people say, I would like this to be used for battery park or playground or parks or I don't know, and whatever they can think of in over 10 years or whatever, perhaps even donors think of, their own restrictions that will kind of dictate the terms themselves. So, but I do like the idea of keeping the minimum on our account, so that, if that's an investment that we have to make as a city of 25,000 or 15, because we already have a startup, that's one of those things where you absolutely want to see it grow, because chances are it's gonna kind of have a return on investment. And the way I see it as an investment, we are just putting 250 really, because we're gonna have that annual report come to us and say, well, guess what, we got, we lost that tax, right? We can, like at that point, pull out and say, okay, we have tried this. So, this is one of those things where, this fee of 250 is either, bringing us something or not. So that's kind of how I see it, I guess, long term. That's kind of, we have to beat market to what councilperson they set by 250, right? Like kind of in revenues a year, which we probably will. So I do think, that's probably something that we can accomplish. But yeah, I think the vagueness of what we do with it is probably beneficial to us.
Oh, I agree with writing the definition of how we use it broadly, but I would still like to see what that definition is going to be.
I'm sure that there's policies that, the DCF is gonna share with us that other clients are using already, that we don't have to invent, something that's already,
Maybe to move forward tonight, we give the city administrator and Councilman Mataway authority to move forward and investigate to set up the fund, and then maybe they come back next meeting with recommendations on where the line item budget money comes from, and where, and how we would handle the disbursements. Whether it's a certain money line if we get to 50,000, or if we just get disbursements every 3 years, or whatever it may be. But at least we can move forward tonight. They can work on getting a fund, and then they can come back and, all in all, it's not a huge risk. It's a very, very small percentage of the city budget. And I didn't look through their investments, but I'm sure if they're, like the flagship, like you said, is probably more conservative, investing in bonds than it is stocks. So there's probably very little risk that we're gonna lose the capital. But I do think it's something that we should move forward with, because I do believe that there's a lot of people in the city that love the city and would do, and provide donations for something like this.
I like that, Councilperson. I just have one question for Councilperson Mataway. Time-wise, is there an incentive to open an account earlier due to tax season? Have you talked to DCF about that? I wasn't sure if there was like December, timeline that's a cutoff, or, is it kind of, are people more incentivized to do this before April 15th, I guess?
So, people give all year round. There's, things called like Giving Tuesday, et cetera, all different types of drives for worthy causes. This initiative,
I'm sorry.
It was purposeful in bringing forward this initiative prior to the year end of 2024. Again, trying to hopefully sow seeds into people's minds that this is something that the city potentially would be interested in. Generally speaking, there is a late push for these types of donations toward the end of the year, honestly, outside of people trying to finish up tax year type of donations.
I just wanted to say this, I mentioned this at the budget meeting last week. The anonymous donation was directed for this fund. If we choose not to establish a fund at all, it's expected to go back. And we need to do that before the end of the fiscal year. So we need to make a decision.
I would then second Councilperson Day's
Yes.
motion with, creating a policy of investment and disbursement.
Okay.
Look up, identifying the $15,000 in the budget, as well as, I guess, resolution would be needed for all of this, both for the budget, 15,000, as well as the policy to be added on our end and identified for the next meeting. If I miss something, that's my second, I guess.
Yeah, I think that covers it. So then this will be back on the agenda next month with those details fleshed out.
Yes.
Sounds good.
But do we need a motion for that, or is that adequate? I made it in the
That's
form of
fine.
motion,
Yeah.
and he seconded it if you wanted to vote.
Oh,
If
yeah,
not,
do we
that's
need a
fine.
formal vote, Mr. Hoffman?
It's just, the one clarification is are you actually, is the intention to open the account before next meeting? Is that what the motion is, or is the motion for the city administrator and Councilman Mataway to get the ducks in a row, to then get the official green light at the next meeting?
I was under the impression at the beginning that we needed a motion to give her approval to do all the research and the groundwork. So no, my motion is not particularly for the opening the account, because I think we're committed, but my motion was to give her the approval to go ahead and move forward with all this.
Yeah, so in that case, you don't need a formal motion. Sometimes it's easier just to take the count, but we are looking for a consensus of council. So if the consensus of council is to move forward, that's sufficient.
Yeah, I agree with you. To not open the account, but to flesh out the details and come back, and then based on that next month, we can make the decision.
Yes,
Okay. All right, thank you.
Oh, I did, get some clarification on your question regarding the 50% development own. So yes, they currently own 100%. The developer currently owns 100%.
Oh, River.
Creative development.
Well, I don't think they could own 100%, and there's already people living there in houses.
They sold some of the houses.
Yeah, but I did look at the list at the end,
Yeah, I was-
and it definitely looked like there was more than 50% in the list. That's why I supported the
Yeah,
motion.
there's residents there, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, the next item is resolution 2025-16, a resolution to sign the Greatest American Cleanup Declaration in partnership with Keep America Beautiful for America's 250th. Whereas the Newcastle City and the United States are preparing for America's 250th celebration in 2026. And whereas Keep Delaware Beautiful established an America 250 beautification grant program to engage communities in beautification efforts to help Delaware look its best on America's 250th celebration in July 2026. And whereas those who apply for the Keep Delaware Beautiful America 250 Beautification Grant Program must sign the Declaration of Action for the Greatest American Cleanup, which commits the city to become part of the largest movement dedicated to making our beloved neighborhoods cleaner, greener, and more beautiful in celebration of our nation's 250th anniversary. And whereas the city of Newcastle has applied for the Keep Delaware Beautiful America 250 Beautification Grant Program to beautify 6 small city parks. And now therefore be it is resolved that the city of Newcastle agrees to complete the Declaration of Action for the Greatest American Cleanup. I guess my only question about this is what exactly is the city committing itself to do?
To encourage these efforts towards beautification, sorry, just a minute in my mouth, beautification, greener areas, and the work that we applied for this grant, which was beautification of the 6 parks to include, planting of, plants in different areas, a public like cleanup day at these different locations, you know, just general cleanup of.
So we're not committing city money?
No.
Or city staff time or anything like that, we're just committing ourselves to try real hard.
Right, towards these efforts.
Okay.
And hope that we get the grant.
And we can certainly coordinate the litter crew events
Right.
Yes.
with the parks, and I know that Keep Delaware Beautiful, we use some of their equipment when we
Yeah.
have the large cleanups. They're vests and they're pickers, and they give us free bags, so it does kind of all dovetail in together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to approve this resolution?
Motion to approve resolution
I'm
2025.
sorry, did you have a comment?
No, I was gonna.
I'm sorry.
I was seconding his.
Oh, okay. All right, so I have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion. All right, Mr. Mataway, the next item is yours also. You wanted to open with a general discussion of possible revenue streams before we discuss resolutions 2025-12 and 2024-46, so.
Oh, that. Sorry.
Thank you, Council President. Ms. Tito was pulling something up. Just want to provide this to the council. Councilperson Sal, Councilperson Day,
Thank you.
Honorable. So again, thank you, Council President. I want to thank fellow council persons, along with the city administrator, neighbors and friends that are with us here this evening, those that are listening in on Zoom, and also would like to acknowledge those New Castilians from 1651 who have labored to get us to this point. And I also need to acknowledge those future New Castilians who will benefit, hopefully, in some way from the legacy that we pass on to them. Those New Castilians who are unborn yet, who we may never meet. This presentation is made with and out of love. It is sealed with faith and signed with hope. Any presentation in regards to the city of Newcastle and revenue must start and end with the number 16. It's been 16 years since property taxes, which is the primary source of revenue for the city, has been changed. I don't say that to cause any rift or anything. I say that because it matters and it drives the point and it provides context in respect to the position that we're in and the position that we want to move to be. I would like to start with, in respect to talking about some revenue things that are happening environmentally, in and around Delaware, etc. So uncorking change. I like the title, and I'm just reading the words of people in this bundle. Delaware lawmakers are gearing up to introduce legislation that can reshape alcohol delivery in their state. A bill focused on wine shipments is expected to be presented during the 153rd General Assembly. Second page, the proposed legislation will allow Delaware residents to order wine directly from wineries and have it delivered to their homes via carriers like UPS or FedEx. Second article from the Business Times. Page 2, Senate Bill 166, sponsored by Senator Jack Walsh Newport, created new provisions to allow restaurant, breweries, and other revenues with liquor licenses to use contractors to deliver alcoholic beverages to the homes of Delawareans for a fee of $1,000 every other year. Third-party services like DoorDash and Uber Eats can register with a license. And on the last page, if the Governor Carney, this was before he moved on, signs the bill, Delaware will become the 33rd state to allow home deliveries of alcohol. You can just page through to the next article, it just talks about that. So what we're seeing here in regards to alcohol is that our state is looking to see what others are doing, and they're saying we want some of that too. Tyler Technologies. We all know here in Newcastle County, there's a reassessment. Well, the reassessment is actually happening throughout the state, in all counties. The next page. One of our counties, June 26, 2024. Kent County is approving increased updated fees in respect to their new capital improvement county impact fees. So we have counties who are moving forward, being innovative in respect to their revenue streams. Let's look at some of our neighbors. Newark, which is a larger municipality, third straight property tax increase among new charges for Newark residents. City of Newark residents will see property taxes go up for a third straight year as Newark City Council discusses how they can draw on more revenue in Delaware's third largest city. The next article, Newark, Delaware's third largest city. They made $1 million in parking tickets in 2024. Again, this is a diversified type of revenue stream that many other municipalities have throughout our state and throughout the country that the city does not have. But they're still looking for more. Next article, please. This one talks about Smyrna. Smyrna's mayor is Mayor Robert C. Johnson. On the bottom of the first page, he says, the town used revenues like real estate transfer taxes and impact fees, along with large transfers from the water and electric fund to fund general operations. This depletion of resources for capital improvements and infrastructure maintenance. On the second page, he says, the town will stop subsidizing the operating budget with funding sources necessary for long-term capital needs. And he said they will begin to pay operating expenses with tax revenue and dedicate utility and one-time funds to grow capital needs. That's not what the city is doing. When I say the city of Newcastle. The next article, please. We're talking about the city of Milton on the second page. If approved, this will be the third straight year Milton increases property taxes. Then on the third paragraph, it references Rogers. That is the city administrator of Milton. She says the main goal with this year's budget is to restore the balance to the town's general fund. Milton's general fund includes all departments except utilities, which had its own budget after having used $726,000 in reserves for 2024 to help balance the budget. It is a long-standing goal of Rogers to want to get the town away from relying on using transfer tax revenue to help with the budget in part due to unprecedented nature of the real estate market. So what she's saying is that the real estate market fluctuates too much, and they do not want to use real estate transfer taxes in respect to their care and balancing the budget. Then we have our friends in Rehoboth, June 25th, 2024. Rehoboth Beach Commissioners approved a 29% property tax increase during the June 21st meeting. Then we have our friends in Lewis. First page, bottom. City of Lewis Subcommittee has unveiled an ambitious plan for raising revenue that will include across-the-board tax and fee increases. The second page, third paragraph, a resiliency or rainy day fund would be in place to mitigate issues ahead of storms, provide money to recover from storms, build more resilient buildings, and provide cost share funds for federal grants. Then, recently, an update to that, February 7th, 2025, on the second page, McCabe, who's an administrator with the City of Lewis, almost middle of the page, not quite, says there would be $1.786 million in the resiliency fund in fiscal year 2026. She said the fund is projected to have almost $5 million in fiscal year 30. So Lewis is actually raising taxes and fees across the board for their future, and they're doing it in a big way, and they're doing it now. February 29th, 2016, our friends in Dewey. First sentence, Uber, Lyft, and other internet-based rideshare drivers take note. Dewey Beach expects the purchase of a $109 business license. Fourth paragraph, this is a quote from Mayor Diane Hansen. If it quacks like a duck, implying that app-based companies are similar to taxi and limousine services, okay? I just wanted to highlight that. So again, people have and are been looking for additional revenue streams. I think that's very inventive in respect to what they're doing down there. Then we have our friends at the Delaware Memorial Bridge. DRBA is proposing a two-phase plan for Delaware Memorial Bridge. The first phase would impact those customers who pay cash and would increase the rate by $1. So they're charging people extra for paying cash, okay? Las Vegas. Our friends in Dewey were onto something. Ride-hailing companies such as Uber and Lyft will need to pay more fees if they want to keep operating in Las Vegas. Las Vegas City Council voted 4-2 Wednesday to begin charging the transportation network companies a $50 semi-annual business licensing fee. Okay, in our state and in other states, cannabis is going to be out there. I personally foresee a moment in time when cannabis is going to be delivered by Uber, Lyft, other places. So this is another opportunity for additional revenue streams that someone is going to attack, and I'll be talking with our state legislators in respect to trying to get ahead of some of those things. New York City. New York City has just implemented a congestion pricing on cars. Vancouver proposed it previously, and on the first page, most drivers of passenger vehicles will be charged $9. Okay, you can't even go driving in New York City without having to pay something. New York City has a lot of money, and they're still looking for other revenue. And New York City is not the only city in the country, in the world that is doing this. There are other cities throughout the world that are doing this. Then we have 9 states take steps to add electric and hybrid vehicle fees. Okay? That's what we have for that one. But then we'll see where, hot off the press, the newly appointed, DelDOT secretary says toll hikes and EV fees may be needed. Okay, and then finally, this here is in respect to a World Economic Forum Summit that was done in collaboration with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and it's called Rethinking City Revenue and Finance. It's from a global report issued August 2022. And I would just highlight the final page that talks about the executive summary, and it talks about stewardship, it talks about continuous exploration of diverse and innovative revenue options. This is what they are saying. Ms. Tantillo, can you please go to the graphs starting with 2017? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
It's cold in here, by the way.
And I'm gonna move through this quickly, but for the record, it's needed.
Sorry.
It's okay. I appreciate everyone. So basically, I'll just start. From 2017 to 2025, the city has continued to carry forward reserves. And what that essentially is taking money out of its savings to fund succeeding year's budget. And from 2017 through 2025, a grand total of over $2.8 million has been taken out of the city's savings to fund slimmed down, lean budgets to an average of over $314,000 per year. I will amend the presentation while Ms. Tantillo
There's been 4 Delaware cities, if you go up, like the slide you saw earlier, at least based on our package.
So, that's all right, I'm sure. So could you,
So with this month's package?
do you want to go to the 2024 budget and the 2017 budget? That example. You can do that one. Thank you. Sure. Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Tantillo. So I just want to do a quick arithmetic. And I just want to point this out to everyone. So we're looking at revenues, 2017 through 2025.
Yes.
That's the comparison thing. Okay. So, okay, 2017, the total budget was $5,313,838, okay? we carried forward $508,018 that year, taking it out of savings. So essentially, that carry forward really should be backed out. If we do that same thing and compare to what we did in 2025, the general budget is $7,027,788.03, and we carried forward almost $1.3 million. And one of the other key comparisons between 2025 and 2017 was a trustee fee appropriation, if you will, et cetera, a payment on the Delaware Street loan. Essentially, the trustees gave the city $225,000 so the city could pay the loan, right? So it's a wash, right? So when you take the $7,027,788.03 and you remove the amount that was carried forward, taken out of savings, and you remove the trustee appropriation because it's a pass-through, you get $5,430,601.30, okay? And then when you take the $5,543,601.30, because that's a larger figure from 2025, and you subtract the $4,805,820, you get $737,781.30. That's the difference. The difference between 2017 and 2015, a period of 8 years. You divide that by 8, the number of years, and this has been validated separately, independently by our city administrator. Is that correct? You get $92,222.66. So $92,222.66 is the projected the average of what we got more each year from 2017 to 2025. Okay? Mr. Antillo, if you would go to our, in regards to 2025 budget.
Sorry, can I ask a question,
Yeah,
sir, before,
Yes.
just for clarification? You mean every year our budget has grown on average $92,000?
Yes, yes, yeah. Increased revenues by approximately $92,000 over the last 8 years.
Total or individually?
Total, each year, year over year.
In addition to the base, I think Councilperson Mato is using base of 4.8.
The starting point from
Yes.
2017.
So this is in addition to that, you're saying increase in revenue compared to that is 90,000 every year.
No, I'm saying 2017, 2018, the average additional revenue is $92,222.66.
Yes, there was 4.8 million in.
Yes.
Then it was, 90,000 more.
Yes.
Year after 90,000.
Yes, yes. So if you look at our police, 2025, we look at our police grand total, or the salaries, let's look at salaries. So, we love our unions. We have 2 unions that, with sets of community members that are part of our family here, in regards to, police and some of the other staff. So, the police salaries, it's a contract, and I believe it's 4% additional increase each year in salaries. So if we take $1.37 million and we take 4% of that, it's $50,000 right there. And if we do nothing, the average additional income that we're projected to get is approximately $92,000. That's real. So, I would say that, okay? If we can go to our budget, go up to please, revenue, okay? So what this is showing is that it's not just property taxes that is the issue. Property taxes haven't been increased in 16 years. But the other additional quote-unquote revenue income streams have not been growing either. And I'll just highlight one. I'll highlight a couple. Franchise fees, Comcast. Okay? So I don't know about you all, but I don't have cable. I do a lot of streaming services. And that streaming services are something that is a growing engine, right? And so I don't believe in the future as many residents that have Comcast, for example, cable right now, are gonna have it 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And what you'll see is that the actual, and the gentleman from the accountant actually showed it, that what we projected for franchise fees, we actually got less. I believe that figure is gonna continue to drop because it's not a service that people, younger people, additional generations are using. Additionally, essential services. In the future, things like free internet service are going to be viewed as essential services for cities and communities. I foresee a point in the future where the city in certain areas would or should provide free Wi-Fi. So what does that mean? Ms. Tintillo, are you in agreement that capital improvement funds, for example, is something that the city should have or look to have?
Yes.
And we do not currently have that right now, right?
Not specified.
It's not specified. Resiliency fund. Do you agree that that is something based upon your technical experience, based upon what we've seen from the consultants and your colleagues in other municipalities, do you agree that is something that the city should think about working to establish?
Yes, we should certainly look into it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, Mr. Hoffman, would you please, there are 3 potential taxing, if you will, revenue opportunities on the table for consideration before this body. Could you please just review for the record the process should council decide to go forward?
So I'll just briefly say, we touched upon this last month's meeting as well. I mean, it's in the state of Delaware, any tax increase that is currently expressly authorized in your charter has to be expressly authorized in your charter in order for the city to impose that tax. So a first step is to go to the General Assembly and request the authority to impose a tax. And then the second step is to actually impose the tax. That's the process.
Okay, and by the city having the ability to do it, if the city imposes it, city gets $50 million. If the fund is set up, it could then remove the tax, not remove the tax, could lessen the tax, right? Provide city flexibility.
Yeah, so once you can take in that second step process, you can take the action within the parameters of the tax. So if the General Assembly says you can impose a tax up to 5%, you can impose a tax 3%, 4%, 1%, you can take that step after you're expressly authorized.
Okay, thank you. So could you pull up the gross receipt? We'll just go to that. So gross rental receipt tax is a tax that's in place at the state level, at many state levels, and it's also implemented, I know, definitely at the city levels throughout the state, throughout the country, etc. The city of Newcastle is very unique because of our size, because of the services that we provide, public works, own police force, etc. So our friends in Fenwick Island have made $510,000, and my colleagues on council under the gross rental receipt. It was in the meeting packet last month. All these different municipalities are highlighted. In many instances, there's a profile in regards to the form in terms of it's completed The process is outlined. Some pay annually, some pay biannually. So Fenwick Island has made $510,000. Selbyville is rolling it out this year. Ocean View made $650,000. Bethany made $2.1 million. Rehoboth Beach made $2.9 million. Lewis, Delaware is in excess of $800,000. I spoke with several of the municipalities. They use the same software system that we have. They've said that they'll be happy to talk with people or answer any questions in terms of troubleshooting. This is something that municipalities are doing. It's very impactful. Some of the municipalities in the form or document bundle in respect to this gross rental receipt, specifically Ocean View, talk about their not wanting to rely on property transfer taxes or fees such as franchise fees, etc. So this is something that they're seeing as well. They're also seeing this as a growth revenue stream. Many municipalities are seeing it grow by leaps and bounds. So in regards to the city of Newcastle, the city of Newcastle currently has 698 units, if you will. So, I'm sorry, I thought it was up there, it's fine. The city of Newcastle currently has 698 units. The units, obviously, some are 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, studios, etc. You can easily see how the city applying this type of tax, if you will, would easily get the city at least $500,000 day one. If the market rate for an apartment, say it's $1,200, I don't have it here, but it's up to you. But we have the chart where we're talking about 698 units, and I think we're using the $1,200 price. So if we have 698 times 1,200, and I believe actually for Newcastle County actually says the price of rent is actually above that. So 698 times 12 months. Do you have that up there? So 698 times 1,200 is $837,000. $837,600. Do that times 12. It's 12 months. It's $10 million. Take 5% of that.
Times 12 twice.
Take,
12 months twice. You multiply by 12 twice, Brian.
okay. 698 times 1,200.
That's a monthly.
That's a month. Yeah,
That's
that's a month. That's the first one is a monthly amount. And then you do that times 12.
So what Councilperson Matter is entering here is number of units times the average rent of 1,200, assumption made here. That's 837,600. That's a monthly rent. Now times 12 would be the amount that you just mentioned. Over 10 million.
$10 million times 5%. It's $502,560. There's a slide in here. It talks about that.
Can we make a motion to move on to the resolutions?
Okay.
It's on the second page on the back of the packet for
last page, sorry, here's the scenario one.
So, okay, so this is, it's impactful.
Do you have any sort of other general broad things that you wanted to say about revenue in general? Because we've been going for half an hour on this now, so.
It's almost 10 o'clock.
It's getting kind of late, I think.
I don't think this is funny.
I
I don't think our financial situation is funny either.
No, nobody's saying it's funny, we're just saying we need to
Okay.
move forward with where this conversation is going.
Okay.
Can I just point out, on the gross rental receipts, isn't the first, I thought I read the formula, the first 300,000 of any like apartment complex or whatever, their first 300,000 is absent or is subtracted from it, so.
That's not true, Mr. Hoffman?
I can't speak to the specifics.
Okay.
I saw that too.
Mr. Hoffman?
But we need,
Okay. We've spoken with multiple municipalities that say they don't have any exemptions. In regards to the first $300,000 being
is that
exempt.
a
or anything
state or
like
a
that.
county?
I
So-
looked it up last month, so I have to look.
Okay, so,
State,
can we move on to the wage, I guess?
Sure.
The charge from the state. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So there are over 15,000. Add that up. There were 15,000 people that work in the city of Newcastle. And this is based upon the Delaware Department of Labor information. It was provided by Arthur Jenkins, who's a labor market economist. Living in the city in 2022, in terms of jobs, people working, was 2,774. So the net outflow is 12,400 and 4 people. If you continue down that line, employed in the city but living outside the city in 2022 was 14,930 people. The proposal is to seek a 0.25% wage tax on, it would be 14,000, based upon 2022 numbers, it would be 14,930 people. This is a de minimis amount across all income levels, and would be an opportunity for the city to seek some additional revenue. I'll close by saying, for the sake of time, that I recognize that this is monumental for the city and it does have impact for the people. And so I would love to create a historic Newcastle Cares program where there's an expansion of the property tax exemption. So right now, there's a city offers an over 65-year-old property tax exemption for single people making $15,000 and married people making $30,000. Those are small amounts. A lot of municipalities are doing $30,000 currently. I would love to move towards that. I would also like to expand that to long-term renters who are valuable members of our community, who very much well, and we could allocate a portion of these funds essentially as grants to long-term renters, if you will, and we can set the parameters. I would love to use this money to shift to from annual requests from our local 501c3 organizations to pledge agreements For example, where the Goodwill Fire Company, where we say, in this year, we'll give you $50,000, next year we'll give you 75, next year after that, we'll give you 100. I would like to create the Russ Smith branding, wayfinding, and map signage and marketing program. Would love to create an amortization for the city to put aside money to account annually for the comprehensive plan. Recently, Mr. Rogers sent myself and Ms. Tintillo an email that said, in today's prices, a comp plan for a city such as the city of Newcastle costs between $60,000 and $100,000. I would like to amortize that and put that off. I would also like to work to close the gap currently in regards to the digital divide. There are many people hurting in our community who don't have currently right now access to internet, and we can do that. I would like to create a down payment assistance program for employees in our city. And the options are plentiful, so I yield. And with that, I ask council to consider moving forward with petitioning Dover in respect to these potential additional revenue opportunities. It would have to come back for council for enactment. And an enactment would not occur before 2026.
If I may, just before we go into resolutions, I wanted to just thank Councilperson Madden for the comprehensive presentation. I know it's not what we all want to sit here and listen to, but it's one of those things that it's helpful for the context of this conversation. I don't know how I'm going to vote on these things, but it's one of those things where I know that looking at our budget, both revenues and expenditure sides and inflationary factors that happen over time and, scheduled increases every year, I am concerned as well in a sense of how are we going to continue to balance the budget year in and year out, if our reliance on, current revenue streams remains the same. So it was one of those things where I was listening to the audit, and every time we listen to, beginning of the meeting of the treasurer report, where, everybody's keep mentioning we're doing good, but one of those caveats being that, like year in and year out, we are moving stuff from, our reserves or savings to close out a budget. And I mentioned this in the past, it's not one of those things, even in your household, that you wanna do, but, it's okay to do that, because that's what emergency funds are for. But you also plan to replenish that fund. So it's one of those things where like having systems in place for that process would be amazing. So I'll personally, I'll work on that as well to, introduce some things to council around those mechanisms. But yeah, I don't know honestly how I vote on any of these things, but I'm having an open mind in the sense that I want to personally set this city for a successful future so that we're not, none of these things necessarily have to happen right now. It's more about doing them now so that, we're smoothing what's happening currently in the budget, so it doesn't happen 10 years from now where we don't have money anymore in reserves, and now we're, putting people 10 years from now in position, not only on council, but residents as well, to figure out what are those steps that need to be done, and then you're having way more drastic measures to do than now. So that's stuff that I keep having in mind as I'm hearing this, because nobody wants to impose a tax, I don't think here. Nobody runs around and say, I want to impose tax. Perhaps some people might, I don't know, I guess. But it is one of those things where last year we sat down in the budget season and we trimmed down budget for probably 1.2 billion, something like that. Because the budget that you saw was much larger, initially proposed, than what we all as council members wanted to also add the services. So we're gonna have to kind of settle on, are we okay with what we have right now? Do we want more from the city? Do we want less from the city? So we don't have to deal with taxes, but those are the kind of mutual understandings we have to have. If we don't want taxes, that means we probably have to cut some of the services we're offering to the city. So those are the conversations I want us all to have in these workshops. What does it mean when we're talking about 100,000 here, 500,000 here, as a revenue stream or expenditure? Like what is that, how does that have to be offset? Because we have, like Councilperson Maddox said, schedule increases pretty much every year, not only in salaries and benefits, which salaries drive, benefits as well, but then you have, every contract that we have with outside vendors, you can correct me if I'm wrong, most likely over the years keeps increasing. If it's annual, keeps increasing. If it's after 3 years, after we renew it, it's probably gonna be more expensive. So all of those things, at some point, revenue-wise, we have to be able to respond to those expenditure increases. And if we haven't done anything for 16 years tax-wise, then you can see that gap. That's why that gap you're seeing up there is increasing. So that's kind of my thinking behind it. And I'm only saying this now because this is kind of general discussion. So I'm happy to talk more specific as we talk for different resolutions, but that's mine.
Okay, I have some general comments too. First of all, to me, the huge elephant in the room is the property tax reassessment. Property tax, my home and most people I've talked to, the assessed value's gone up 4 or 5 times. So that means that even if we keep our tax rates exactly as they are, our revenue is going to increase dramatically because the 1.2% of $500,000 instead of $100,000 is going to bring in more money. We don't know the ultimate outcome of this reassessment yet. So I don't see how we can make intelligent decisions, reasonable decisions about imposing new taxes until we have the information on the property tax reassessment. We may be able to lower the property tax rate and still bring in more revenue because the values of the property have increased. So to me, some of this is premature in terms of going to the General Assembly for permission for charter change requests. And then, as you said at last month's meeting, well, then we'll see if we need to do these things after we get the reassessment information. I had a conversation with Senator Poore about charter changes. I asked her if she was aware of any cities that had requested a charter change, been granted it, and then not followed through and enacted it. And she said no. So, and I said, and does the General Assembly not look kindly on, would she think that they would not look kindly on a town who requested a charter change, were given it, and then didn't take the further action to enact it? And she thought that that might be the case, that they would not look kindly on that. So I don't think a charter change is something we should request just in case we might need to do it. I think we should know exactly what we want to do and that we need to do it before we ask for the charter change. And I know the cycle of requesting charter change means that that would put it off until next year. But I think it's better to make a reasonable request, knowing what we're doing, than to make a request and then not follow through, which kind of makes us look like we don't know what we're doing in the General Assembly's eyes. I also spoke to her about how frequently we should request charter changes. And she said, well, there's no rule about it, but she's been in office 12 years, and Newcastle has requested 3 or 4 charter changes in that time. So that's a charter change every 3 or 4 years. And I said, is that mostly the rate at which other towns do it? And she said, yes. And again, I said, well, if we were to request them more frequently, would the General Assembly be likely to not be pleased by that? And she kind of thought they might not be happy with that. It's better to consolidate multiple changes into each request and make them less frequently. And finally, with the wage tax, Delaware Code provides that only cities with a population of 50,000 or more may impose a wage tax. And so I asked Senator Poore, do you think the General Assembly would be likely to grant Newcastle a charter change to impose a wage tax? And she said, does Newcastle have over 50,000 people? And I said, obvious answer is no. So I don't think it's very likely that we would be granted that charter change. And I asked her, if we were to request that charter change to do something that's counter to current Delaware law, how do you think the General Assembly would respond? Would they look unfavorably on us for asking that? And she thought they might. So the bottom line is, I think This is premature because we don't have the information on the property tax reassessments. And secondly, I think charter changes are things that need to be done in a more consolidated and manner for things that we know what we want and we know exactly how we want to enact them.
So I appreciate the diversity of thought, but I need to clarify because you made an assumption or insinuation of something that I feel. I did say that going there, it then comes back here that gives you the flexibility. I believe that these new revenue is something that the city needs. And I believe that these taxes are necessary based upon the history. I'm prepared to act if it does come back. I was just saying that it provides the flexibility, and that was affirmed by Mr. Hoffman in regards to going up to that amount or any amount in between. In respect to your comments around the Delaware law, Mr. Hoffman's here, but he and his colleague would not allow me to present something that, I mean, he would have stopped me. So to say that, you know, the General Assembly cannot allow us to move forward with this because of our population size is just not true, and it's not what he said last month. It's not.
I did
Mr.
not
Hoffman.
say that the General Assembly could not. I said they would not be likely to because the state law sets the 50,000 population limit. And I think Mr. Hoffman has a comment.
Just on that point, you're talking about two separate questions. The question of legally can you, the answer is yes. The General Assembly, if the General Assembly adopted a charter change, can allow you to impose a wage tax. That's the legal answer. The second question, which I think the council president was speaking to, is would they likely do it? And obviously that's not a legal question, I can't speak to that.
Right.
And so, again, I don't know, will they do it or not do it? I failed in my life. And I'm willing to try because I think it's for the best interest of Newcastle. I can't predict the future. What I do know is that you made references to Senator Ford, right? I had a conversation with her as well. And she said to me, if my town passes it, I run it. And I think that, you know, questions or answers are based upon information that you give to them. If you said to her, the city of Newcastle plowed through $3 million since 2017, that we had no resiliency fund, we had no capital improvement fund, the city administrator wants to hire people but can't, do you think we should look for other revenue streams? She would say yes. So it's based upon how you pose a question. Additionally, if you asked her, does she think her other colleagues would support a resolution that their people are asking for, her answer undoubtedly will be yes.
Okay, what she said to me was, if the council requests me to propose the charter change to the General Assembly, I will take it to them. I will run with it. She used exactly those same words. So if we pass a resolution requesting a charter change to allow a wage tax, she will take it to the General Assembly. I agree with you, that's what she said. But then my second question to her is, do you think the General Assembly will pass it? And her answer to that was, does Newcastle have over 50,000 people? Implying that no, she doesn't think they will pass it. In other words, she'll take the request to them if we ask her to. That's not the issue. And I also want to back up a bit when you talked about taking money from reserves and made that the equivalent of taking money out of savings. I don't think that's quite an accurate description of that money, because when we budget, we tend to be conservative in that we underestimate incomes and overestimate expenses, because we don't want to be caught up short if we did it the other way around, which means if we don't spend the full amount budgeted by the end of the year, there's money left over, and that's the reserve that rolls over to the next fiscal year. Now, yes, it would be good if we could have a capital reserve fund, and we do have some money. Most of that right now is from the ARPA money, but we had some other capital reserves as well. But it's not the same as taking it out of savings. It's because we had money left over from last year and we're rolling it over into the current year. And I don't think that's the same as robbing savings.
I didn't say robbing savings.
Wait, excuse me, you did not. Taking it from savings.
No, can you use this microphone, I'll take that one.
So,
We work this one?
did either of you have any comments, Mr. Day or Mr. Zell?
I would just like to ask something that you mentioned, I'm curious about that too, about the property reassessment. And this is more a question for Ms. Tantillo, but Councilperson Ada, if you research this, that would be, so please feel free to jump in, as well as the legal expert in the room. So in your presentation, you mentioned that there are several cities in the state of Delaware passing the property tax increase this year, as recent as February, correct? So what property assessed value are they using? The new one? The old one? Because I
Well,
agree.
Kent and Sussex County got their numbers.
Okay, so they are using new ones, so they're imposing, my
My
question was.
understanding is
they're
Kent
raising
has
that.
their numbers, so that would be Smyrna.
So they're using the adjusted, reassessed value, and they still need property tax.
Apparently.
Okay,
Some
so-
places may do their own assessments.
Yeah, well, that's true too. Not everybody
Gotcha.
uses the county assessment.
All right, that was just something I wanted to know. So, and the question I have for you, to Niana, is, are we able to get preliminary, numbers? Because if I go to my parcel right now, there's a old assessed value, and then to the right of it is my new assessed, pending, right, temporary, right, until it's all official after the disputes. Can we start running those numbers through our system so we can have a better picture of what President Souder is talking about, like, if it is indeed 5 times more?
It's not gonna be that
But,
much, but it's gonna be more.
But that doesn't matter, right, for this entire conversation, if this is $1 million, $100,000, 3, that changes probably everybody's opinion in this room. No doubt we need to still diversify our revenue, but it would change by how much, right? Like how much urgency we need to put in. So can we do that? Like, can we talk to Tyler to give us
We can
a
start
rough
looking
number?
for, rough numbers, and I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, and you might correct me if I'm wrong, but when we get the new values, we're going to have to neutralize the, okay, the tax rate. So we're gonna have to take our current tax rate and our current, tax revenue and find out the amount that we're going to make if we revise the tax rate to make the same amount of revenue with the new.
So it'll be revenue neutral, we have to
Right.
figure out.
And that's just to show the public that this is what the new tax rate would be if we made it revenue neutral. Then 14 or 15 days later, we can change that, increase or decrease, however we see fit. So we will show the public the, difference of, this is what your old tax rate was, bring in this amount of revenue, this is your new tax rate.
So for
Bring in-
simplicity, for everybody in the room, people listening to the meeting, fake numbers, people, very fake numbers. I know we're talking millions, but $100, because it's easier to understand.
Yeah.
Right? Total property values in the city of Newcastle, let's say 10% for sake of argument, we were getting $10 every year. Let's say we doubled the property value to 200, now we have to lower it to 5%. Like that's what we're talking, like artificially lower it for public, and then discuss
As like
next
a
steps.
trial run or something.
Correct.
Is that understanding?
Yes.
We'll simplify it. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I think Mr. Day has some things.
Yeah, I just have a couple of things. One is, I'm in favor of actually looking at new revenue sources. I just agree that we have to get our tax rate settled first, so we actually know where we're going. And it's been 16 years since we've had an increase in property taxes, so I don't think the sky's fallen yet. I mean, I do agree that it'd be nice to set up the city long-term, so that we are always fiscally responsible and have a rainy day fund. But even not raising taxes in 16 years, we still have a bigger rainy day fund than we actually need to have, where we have more than 6 months worth of expenditures and savings.
Right.
So with that said, I just wanted to point out a couple issues that keep coming up. I haven't seen that the lodging tax would actually bring more money in than it would cost to recoup it. So asking for a lodging tax to me is actually asking to spend more money to collect a little bit. That doesn't make sense. So the wage tax, one of the things we haven't talked about, we've talked about all these workers working in the city, but a wage tax taxes every city resident as well. Even if you don't work here, a wage tax applies to you if you live in the city. So again, that's.
I'm gonna interrupt you, but that's not how this is constructed. This would be it's defined, and it says it's here, it's been presented this way for the last few months, for people that work in the city. That's how this is particularly carved out. And in regards to the lodging tax, I've been in communication with other municipalities, and the state, for example, mentioned a couple of months ago, the state is charging 4.5%, counties can charge 3%. They're looking to charge these types of establishments in the same likelihood that they do hotels, 11%. And I've been in communication with some people at the state that actually say they actually have, I can't think of the legal word, agreements where they'll collect it for the municipalities.
Okay, just tell me how much you're projecting we would get on a lodging tax a year.
Well,
how much would we get?
So I represented the lodging tax, coupled it with the rental tax, because.
No, I don't wanna do that. You've got a lodging tax in here separately. How much would we collect on a lodging tax a year?
It would be about $8,000.
And how much,
So,
Ms. Tangelo, do you think it would cost for us to actually collect that? Would it be at least a quarter of a person a year?
No, it will.
Hold on a second.
There's forms here that what other municipalities do. They send it out when the annual license goes out, and they say, here, send it in. We've talked to municipalities, they say there's nothing.
I'm not sure if it would be a 0.25%. It would definitely take some legwork to ensure that everyone is compliant and following up with that. But I can't say that it would take a quarter. I would want to speculate on that.
I'll just say it'll take more than $8,000. $8,000 for an employee is just a couple months' time for an employee. And you can say that they're just gonna send it in and give it to you for free, but there's also chasing it down, calling them up, setting a system to track it. There's a lot more to it than just saying, oh, you know, they're just gonna send us the check. And I'll go back on the wage tax. You can say it's not set up like that, but the only city in this whole state that has a wage tax charges it to the members of their own community. So every resident in the city of Wilmington pays a wage tax. There's no way the state's gonna say, yes, you can have a wage tax and not charge your own citizens. It's just not gonna happen. Like, if they gotta charge the city of Wilmington residents their wage tax, like, it's just not realistic, to be honest with you.
And the gross taxes, the gross rental tax is unrealistic as well?
I didn't get to that.
Okay.
And again, I'm not opposed to actually looking at that, but what I hear you saying is, okay, we're gonna raise rents for everybody, but then we're gonna develop a system and we're gonna give that money back to somebody else that's renting anyway. So it's kind of confusing where we're going here with it, but I do think it's worth looking at. But I've heard people say that there are some exemptions to that. It would be interesting to know.
I have emails from municipalities, and Mr. Tyler has said it, where they say that no, the exemptions don't exist. And they've been charging it since 2012. She just saw one.
Is it my turn?
I'm sorry.
I don't mind having, I feel like I've gotten cut off. And I've said that. And, you know, that may have some value, but one, we are raising rents on people. So I calculated it out, about the $1,200 rent, so you're raising rents for a rental unit about $723 a year, and that's at 5%. So again, you know what I mean, we're raising rents, and then we're talking about having these programs to actually give it back to other people, which kind of concerns me. It seems like we're creating taxes so that we can create programs to spend. And, you know, it is concerning to me that we're not doing this wholesale and that we're not looking at the whole picture, including setting our tax rate that hasn't been increased in 16 years first. I'm done. Thank you.
Mr. Zoe, did you have anything to add?
Everything's been hit.
also just want to point out one more thing about the rental tax. The example cities you use are all beach resort communities. Beach resort communities have an entirely different rental profile than a residential community like ours. They rent houses for as much per week as you would rent them for a month here, because people pay to go to the beach for their vacation. And so when you talk about $800,000 in Lewis and $1 million in Rehoboth, those are beach resort communities, and I do not think it's a fair comparison to Newcastle. And you listed, in our packet, you gave us Fenwick Island, Ocean View, Bethany Beach, Rehoboth, and Lewis, and Selbyville. All but Selbyville are beach communities. Selbyville's only 8 miles from the beach. They advertise it that way on their website. And because the property values along the coast are getting so high, the tourist traffic and the vacation homes and rentals are moving inland to try to get lower property values. Selbyville just passed theirs. It takes effect this year with the first payments due next year. So we have no basis of comparison from them because they don't have any income from it yet. So you've given us lots of data, but I don't think it's relevant to Newcastle.
So we do have 698 units. We have an idea of how much the units go on average. We know that there's been already approved over 1,000 units. So if we can do the math, and we can project how much it can be. In respect to we're increasing rates, I can't say that's the case. Because, for example, we haven't increased property taxes in 16 years. Have people's rents within the city gone up in the past 16 years? So they go up independent on what we do. And I'll finish on this because the die has been cast. The idea of a gross rental tax in the city of Newcastle is not new. Franchise fees, they're paying us a percentage off what they get. MSC pays the city of Newcastle through an appropriation a 6% on their gross receipts. Is our 6% that we get increasing the rates and how much people pay throughout the city in MSC?
Probably.
It's part of their
Business
expense.
is business. Business is business.
That's right.
We have a gross receipt tax when people do work on their homes. We charge them 1.5% on the aggregate of the work that they get done.
Right, the permit. But the landlords are business people, and they base their rent on expenses. And so if they have to pay a rental tax, they're gonna pass that along to their tenants. And their property taxes are going to go up too with the reassessment. So that's another increase that's gonna be passed on to the tenants. So that's why we need to, in my view, we need to know what's happening with the reassessment and figure out where we're going from there with the property tax rates before we look at these other things. I'm not saying don't look at other revenue streams. I agree, we need to solidify some things and diversify. But we've got to know what the base is, and the base is our property tax. And that's changing because of the reassessment, and we don't have that information yet, and we're not likely to for several more months. So that's my main point.
I
Yes.
just wanted to add one more thing. And taking this into context of as a whole, we know we're probably going to have to raise property taxes. But when you raise property taxes, you institute a wage tax and you institute a rental tax, it's compounding for people.
That's right.
So now you're hitting their property taxes, which is just a pass-through for your rent. Or if you own, you're gonna pay more property taxes, then you're paying a wage tax. I just don't even think it's fair that we're considering all this at one time. If we raise taxes this year, theoretically, if we had to, maybe we look down the road and say, all right, let's see where we're at and what other revenue streams we could put into effect. But to do all this at one time seems like you're really taking a hammer to the to the taxpayers of the city.
I just want to add to that. I was talking with Councilperson Mataway before the meeting, and one of my asks were, if we could add language about, even if the legislative body approves and gives us authority, like I could not, right now, vote for this in a certain language if we didn't have it, 2, 3 years down the line, in a language written down, so that, we're not overtaxing people at the same time. So that's one of those things that I was thinking about the same way too, Councilperson Day. But at the same time, I do like the rental gross receipts. I wanna understand better, how does that work, because it seems like a promising thing. So one thing I would ask Ms. Tantillo is to, besides getting the estimate of, newly assessed values, or, however you wanna, code that, it would be nice to have those numbers, sooner, so we can continue this conversation. But also, if you could look into what have the cities that have the gross rental tax, done in a way, like, what was the outreach when they had these workshops? Who was involved in this conversation, so we can make sure that we are kind of touching all the stakeholders that should be at the table with us about this, so that we're not unintentionally doing something that we're not trying to do. I see, from what I've seen so far, it seems like an amazing revenue source, but I would like to kind of, do due diligence of an understanding. Do we need to bring, owners of these apartment complexes? Do we need to bring more people who are living in rental complexes into a room to have that, conversation kind of deepen our understanding of what is happening and how would that impact them? So that's kind of what I would ask you to do in the meantime, to see what other cities have done, as they were thinking about introducing this, in there. And yeah, that goes up to the ask. I would like to know more about it. Thank you.
I understand, I respect everybody's opinion. I do. Not only do these communities have gross rental receipt taxes, they have impact fees. Impact fees up and down the state. We don't have holistic impact fees. We have impact fees for one area, one community. So I guess all their rates are being driven up by impact fees, by gross rental receipt fees. They have alderman courts, they have parking. They have all these things that we just don't have. I mean, the ferry left Newcastle in 1952 because of the Delaware Memorial Bridge, and we have to move forward. How is the city gonna look eventually to borrow money? They're gonna look at our revenue streams, and it has to be diversified.
I don't think anyone is saying that we don't need to look at our revenue streams and look at diversifying them. I think what I'm saying, and I think Mr. Day is saying, and perhaps others too, it's too soon because we don't know how the reassessment's gonna shake down. And that means putting all this off for a year because it involves charter changes. And that will give us time to see how things shake down, and then maybe we need to look at some of these things, but we can't throw everything at the residents all at once.
I understand.
Can we move forward with the resolutions?
Are we going, do we want to take a vote on the resolutions tonight?
Or do you want to table them so we can consider them later?
I think, I'll leave this to Councilperson Mataway, and the rest of the council. I would love to know some projected numbers before making any decision, honestly. So, but I do think this is not something we have to wait months. I do think we can know sooner than that. Even preliminary numbers would be better than what we have right now, because how much appeal can you do? So like, if we have a base right now of X, reassesses X plus Y, that Y is not gonna change whole much. We can have probably several households, or even, tens of households who are doing appeal, but you see what I'm getting, right? So we can add 10–20% error to our number. I'm comfortable with that, but I'm just curious, are we I know that we're equalizing the number, but I just wanna know what is the base that we're working with.
But it's not just the cost of how much we're bringing in, but how much it costs to administer it, the system to administer it.
So I was just talking about research property tax. You're talking about lodging tax?
Well, no, the whole thing. For each of the items, there's cost to administer this stuff.
I was just talking about property,
legal
sorry.
fees, all this good stuff when people don't pay. So it's not just pulling in the money, but how much does it cost to pull in that money?
So all of these examples, they have forms, they mail it out, people, send in, no one's kicking in anybody's door. They said it's automated system.
And that's for the honest people. What about the people who are not honest and we need to go after them?
Okay. Is there a sense that we should vote on these two resolutions tonight? Or should we table them for still more information, or table them until we have more information about our reassessment?
Move to table, based upon, the conversation, for another time.
Okay, are you moving to table both 2025-12 and 2024-46? The one, the 25-12 is the gross rental tax, and 2024-46 is the wage tax and the lodging tax.
Yes, Council President.
Okay, so we have a motion to table these two resolutions. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay, so we have, is that an aye from you, Mr. Mataway?
Aye.
Okay, so the resolutions are tabled. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all who stuck with us all this time.